Hello everyone and welcome to night 2 of the 2022 NAB AFL Draft. Now last night we saw 21 players realise their dreams have been drafted to an AFL club, and there will be plenty more excitement and even a little bit of drama tonight here on NAB AFL Draft Night Live as the next batch of hopefuls discover their fate. And back again to help me analyse each and every pick tonight, the draft guru himself, Cal Toomey, and our club expert Riley Beveridge. Welcome back, gents. It's good to see you had a good night's sleep, Riley, and you're back fresh.
Yeah, I had a good night's sleep. I definitely didn't leave my keys at work and back and forth a few times, but I had picks swirling around in my head, and I think that's what was confusing me at the time. But it's good to be back.
It is great to be back, and there's 21 picks last night. Looking forward to about 40 picks tonight. So looking forward to seeing some of the players who missed out in the opening night of the draft get their opportunity over the next few picks that we'll get to shortly. And there are some good players still on the board. I'm really interested to see what happens at the early part. And then there's always some bolters and some surprises later in the piece in a national draft. So who will they be? Who will make those surprises? That's part of the fun tonight.
Plenty of fun still to come. Of course, there's about 40 minutes or so until we start the process again and the draft kicks off. Now, as it stands right now, the Giants still have that first pick on night 2 of the draft, Cal. Has there been any murmurings about whether they could trade it off? Are they keeping it? What's the latest?
There has been a fair few murmurs, Nat, around what they could do at that selection. I think last night we saw, obviously, a bid come through a little bit earlier than expected on Harry Rowston, which probably should change their view of what their picks would look like. There's been targeted approaches from clubs looking at that selection now at pick 22 to see what they can do. It's basically the pick one again, the pick one of the next night. So you get first choice of who's going to be there. You get a night to sleep on it and to work out who might be in the mix there. But the Giants at pick 22 hold the cards for the rest of things to unfold from here. West Coast, of course, at 23. The Bulldogs, Bombers and North Melbourne to follow. Look, there's been conversations across today, but there hasn't been any movement as part of the pick swaps window that has just closed. There's 45 minutes the clubs had to do some trades before the event started tonight. So 5:45 through to 6:30. That's just obviously in the past couple of minutes closed without any trades being made. So we'll go into the night in about half an hour's time with the order as we expect. But Melbourne's had some interest in getting up to 22. Who could that be for? Is it Jacob Ryan or Kobe Vergil or a couple of other players in that mix as well? Harry Barnett's been linked there. The Eagles, I think, probably hold at that selection. The Bulldogs and Bombers and North Melbourne all are expected to hold as well, unless something really, really strong comes through, I think. So unlike a couple of years ago, it might be more like last year where there is a bit of a formula now where clubs are pretty happy with the group that's gotten through overnight and don't want to be trading out of there. The other part of this is that clubs really can only use their future picks to get a pick in now. And the point of that being that they don't really want to buy into their future too much to move up a couple of spots. There are some clubs who are looking around though. I know North Melbourne's pick in the future, which is now tied to Adelaide, is being used as a chip for the Crows to get back into the top end of the draft again. So the Crows have been interested and using that future second round pick to get back in. I'm not sure if that will happen. St Kilda has been looking for another selection, potentially inside the top 30 as well. They've got one coming up in a few selections as well tonight, and a couple of interesting selections for them coming too as well. They start tonight at pick 31 and then number 35 as well. So they're another club that we keep an eye on for a potential trade. But those talks now will resume when the draft resumes pretty shortly.
Yeah, which is in about 35 minutes or so. Now, the clubs are in Marvel Stadium and so is our colleague Sarah Ollie. Let's get out to her now. Sarah, is it all systems go?
It's all systems go, Nat. I'm back here at Marvel Stadium, as you just alluded to, but not down in the Victory Room, up here on Level C. Now, for those tuning in on the live stream at home, if you're thinking, what in the heck is Level C? Well, it's the corporate floor here at Marvel Stadium. This is where the corporate suites are. It's where our broadcast partners are. It's also where you might find Cal and Riley on match day completing their match reports on the buzzer. But of course, no footy today, so instead of serving up food and booze, those in the corporate suites, they'll be serving up draft picks and potentially a few more trades of those draft picks. And when clubs are done here, Nat, Callan, Riley, we'll have a little chat to them and assess how they've all done. Of course, there's always winners and no losers when it comes to the draft period. And Riles, in particular, I'm looking forward to speaking to your sparring partner at the Swans list boss in Kinnear Beatson, because he absolutely blew the draft apart last night, and hopefully we're in for a little bit more excitement when that does happen. We will bring it to you here on the AFL Live app and afl.com.au. Nat?
He's a sparring partner of mine. I think he might be a sparring partner of a few clubs as well, given the activities and the agitation that he caused last night with bids on Max Michelini and also Harry Rouston. So it was one to watch, and the Swans are going to be another one to watch tonight.
No, they certainly are, and I cannot wait for Sarah to interview him later on tonight. But let's go back and recap what happened on night one of the draft, of course. And Cal, you're all dynamic. You're standing up there with round one. I love it at the
Dynamic.
plasma. Take us through, because it all started,
You have a
obviously.
grab of it. That's the next year you should be able to...
Oh, yes, I like this. I like it. Now, Aaron Cadman, obviously the number one draft pick of the NAB AFL draft. And then Will Ashcroft, that bid coming there. You got all of this right. We'll review your phantom draft in a moment. But just talk us through how it played out.
Yeah, well, as expected in the early part, wasn't it, with Aaron Cadman at the Giants getting their key forward there, Will Ashcroft, the bid coming for him via North Melbourne, Harry Sheasel and George Wardlaw, their duo that have been so strongly linked to them for a little while now. Of course, this was a big selection. We knew that clubs down here, Melbourne's here now. Melbourne there, the Bulldogs were looking to get up as well, potentially if the right deal was on the cards. The Gold Coast had to think about getting up. The Bombers were open to trading it. They had some good offers for it, but in the end, you go with talent, and they had the choice between Elijah Sardis and also Mateus Filippo. They chose Sardis. Bailey Humphrey got through to the Suns, an excellent choice there. Cam McKenzie, that was a big pick for the Hawks. A few midfielders up for grabs. That they chose one of the bigger ones in 188-centimetre midfielder there. He's one of the smaller mids in the group, Jai Clark, but he was way too good to pass up for the Cats, and just so helped that he was a couple of minutes away down the road. He's a couple of hours down the road. Ruben Jimby from his club in Dunsborough. He goes up to Perth to join the Eagles, and they did the double act, the WA double act in Elijah Hewitt and Jimby. So a couple of powerful midfielders with some speed and movement through the midfield there. Mateus Filippo, such a talked about player leading into the night. Where would he go? He's a bit of the wild card within the top group, but the Saints find a potential match winner there. Look, clearly the Dogs and the Blues are looking for runners to start with. Oliver Hollands got there. I think he would have been right in the mix had the Dogs been available to get him. The Dogs then made the bid on Jasper Fletcher, who, of course, the Lions matched as a father-son selection, got the key defender, Jed Buslinger. Matt Jefferson got to the Ds, their key forward. They're obviously wrapped with that. Harry Rouston, this is where it got interesting, Ryle. As you mentioned before, the Swans, while they were on the clock, made a bid on Harry Rouston, which was matched by the Giants, and saw their pick push up there. Then they made another bid with Max Michelini with the Crows, which, of course, the Crows matched that one. And then when they got to pick 18...
They still didn't want it.
They still didn't want it. They made the call to trade back. They've got another pick here in the 20s, and Hawthorn have jumped back up to take their second pick inside the first round and take Josh Weddle. So good player. They moved a bit of stuff to make that happen, but a key defender. I think the Pies will be wrapped to get Ed Allen at that point of the draft. And then, of course, things finished off with a couple of small forwards, Jacob Constanti and Darcy Jones. So that was how we probably predicted a lot of it to go, but it still has to play out that way, and there were some surprises. And I think this drama in here was a big talking point overnight around how that all played out from the Swans' perspective, what they were doing there, and trading back as well to make all those moves.
So let's see how it did play out in comparison.
That's the Phantom, isn't it? Now we're going to...
Well, this is the Phantom, and this is how it went, because you can see all the green on the left-hand side. We're saying you went 13 from 13, really, Cal.
Yeah, we're going with 13.
I mean, it looks quite nice there with the green, doesn't it?
You're trying to stir me.
I'm not.
For those out there who are colourblind, I feel your pain, because I actually can't see which ones I got right or wrong.
It looks like a Christmas board.
Well, yeah, well that's true. Sort of, which is is good, because I didn't want to see any of the ones that I got wrong anyway. So those runs, yeah. I was nervous about the Bombers, but I still thought that Elijah Sardis was probably going to be their guy, and Cam McKenzie was a little bit nervous about that. I thought if those two went that way, then we'd probably get the rest in that order. Where it first went awry was Ed Allen, and that being used on Elijah Hewitt instead. So the WA factor, picked the wrong WA play there. We thought the Demons would get Jefferson if it went that way. Clearly the trade started to happen in here, but yeah, we're counting Fletcher because he moved up and obviously was going to the Lions under that respect. So a couple of these players are still on the board. Lockie Cow and Jacob Ryan, they're still available today, and we'll talk about them shortly. Braden George.
Well, could Braden George actually end up at the Giants?
Unlucky here.
Yeah, that could actually be switched around.
Come on. We're counting that as a win as well, I think. So, and these guys are going to be interesting today, and we'll get to them shortly. But Elijah Hewitt clearly is off the board. But
and you did have him going to West Coast anyway.
Let's give that.
Let's count it as well.
Make it green. They press that button, make it green. Lewis Hayes, Tom McCallum, Max Krzyzewski, a few of the talls who are expected to be taken over the first 10 or so selections tonight. Harry Barnett, another player who could be around this mark as well for the Eagles, been linked in there. Charlie Clark, I think, is a chance to get to the Bulldogs if the Giants don't take him there as well. Braden George and Max Krzyzewski have been linked to that. Take him there as well. Braden George and Max Krzyzewski have been linked to that Giants pick if they do hold. They have had some just as we mentioned before, but yeah, there's a few good options there, and Kobe Bergiel is another one who could be in the mix.
Well, we will chat about some of those players that are still available in just
a fair chance we have his name called in the first number of selections tonight, and he would be deserving of that because he's been a really consistent performer across this year.
What about Braden George from the Murray Bushrangers? Because unfortunately he's not going to be playing footy in 2023. He had a knee reconstruction late in the season, but he's such a powerful player. Really hope he can get back to what he showed.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a real shame of this year's draft, to be honest, that we didn't get to see a full year from Braden, because what he showed at the start of the season, he was hanging on him, free kick, surely. He is a player who knows how to kick goals. He can bang him in from a long way out. I always joke with Josh Rochelle that he might be a better kick than Josh, and Josh doesn't like that. Yeah, Murray Bushrangers teammate. So there's definitely a little bit of Josh in the way he can get some action around the goal. This was a game I was at earlier this year, kicked 5 in the first round of the season and dominated inside 50. A knee injury at the start of the season ruled him out for about 8 weeks or so. Came back, played a couple of games, and that was about it. He went down with an ACL injury after that, so we'll miss all of next year, which is a big shame. But I think if he'd played this year, he probably would have been taken in the first 12 or so selections. Yeah, okay. I really do believe that he would have had such a dominant season, and his talent is that strong. I've mentioned it a couple of times. He reminds me so much of what Christian Petrarca was like as a bottom major before he moved through the midfield, just inside 50, being a bit of a beast in there. So he could well be one of, he is one of the guys who's in the mix for the Giants' first pick tonight. I think the Bulldogs would look at him as well if he got through to that point. But yeah, there's a lot of clubs who will be really keen to take a shot at his talent. And
it's not a bad comparison to make as well, given the fact that we know Christian Petrarca did an ACL very early in his football journey as well, and look at what he's become as a Norm Smith medalist and such a fantastic player for Melbourne in that premiership season in 2020.
Where do you think he would be a good fit, Riley?
Well, I think he'd be a good fit anywhere. I look at these players that are 187, 188 centimetres, but when they're forward half players and they can take a mark above their head, they're so hard to match up on. Yep. They're such an awkward matchup because you can't put a small defender on them because they'll beat them in the air, but you can't put a key position defender on them because they're so good at ground level as well. So I think he's almost that prototype player now that a lot of clubs are looking for in the modern game, that can be the forward half difference maker. We've seen Christian Petrarca do that when he does play forward. He's now since gone into the midfield and become a champion midfielder as well. But so many players will be looking at this type of player and wanting him at their football club.
Charlie Clark is a very crafty half forward, I guess you'd say, for the Sandy Dragons, Cal, and he kicked, I think, 29 goals across Sandy's season.
Yeah, he's a goal kicker, that's for sure. He loves goals, just loves them. He loves celebrating goals, he loves kicking goals, he loves creating goals, and he will bring that energy to whichever forward line he joins tonight and throughout his AFL career. He kicked 7. Might have been that game actually against Tasmania. He kicked 7 goals down at Moorabbin one day and had a dominant day out and showed that he can go through the midfield at stage as well. Was pretty good for Vic Metro at different stages. Played in the Sandringham Dragons Premiership in the NAB League as well. Yeah, he's a goer. He's just a high energy, high octane, creative and classy around goal. So he's another player who the Giants have looked at really strongly. It's going to be interesting to see if they do go with him, given they did pick up a small last night in Darcy Jones. So they pick another player who's of a similar ilk, but he'll be around that mark. I think the Bulldogs would again be looking at him potentially, and North Melbourne as well. So I think he'll be one of the first names called out tonight.
All right, looking at a defender now from South Australia in Jacob Ryan. What can you tell us about him in terms of his strengths and aside from his amazing hair?
Yeah, mullets and both
know
earrings as well. He's got some style. 189 centimetres. He's a flashy player who will catch the eye with his rebound out of defence and long kicking. Look at the hair flow. If he gets going as a player, I think he'll be a bit of a cold hero,
yeah.
Jacob Ryan. Look, he's got some interest. We mentioned him yesterday as being right in the sights of Collingwood. I think he would have been a really strong chance to join them had Ed Allen not got through to their pick. But there's also now a possibility that he gets through to their second selection, which of course is coming up as well at number 28 tonight. So that's a possibility, but yeah, really strong season for him for South Australia and in the Sanford Under-18s competition for Glenelg. And yeah, I think that he's a rebounder who provides a bit of pizzazz.
I wonder if Sydney would be looking at him as well at 27, if he might be an option for them there, whether or not clubs attempt to try and trade up and grab him again as a player that was talked about as a potential first night prospect, given he's still on the board early in the second night, whether or not it becomes a trade option for clubs. He's also got that really loping running style, which makes him a bit more of a fan favourite, I think. He's quick, but sometimes he can get the ball and you don't know what's coming next, which I really like, but he's got that unpredictability to his game.
Yeah, still have a nice little sidestep there or two.
3 seconds in the 20 and 6:15 in the 2 kilometre time trial. So that's
Athletic.
a really good mix for a player his size.
Yeah, no, a lovely mix indeed. Well, ruckmen are often hard to find, and Harry Barnett is probably the best one in this year's draft pool. He's from West Adelaide and also athletic, and you've likened him to Brodie Grundy, Cal.
Yeah, I think he plays, if you're looking at ruckman and the way they play, I'm not saying he's going to be the next Brodie Grundy, but he's got that athletic capability to take a mark like that and be your long kick down the line and be able to stop it that way, but also go forward. At ground level for a ruck is really strong. He played at senior level for West Adelaide this season. Actually spoke to Hamish Hartlett, the former Port Adelaide player, who was playing alongside him, and said his ruck work was his ruck craft as Max Gorman would call it, was spot on. So he is a player who I think is definitely in the sights of a few clubs tonight. Has been linked to Melbourne, of course, at different stages over the past couple of days, but also the Giants and West Coast as well, I think would look at him as well once they get on the board tonight at their first pick, which is 23. So, yeah, it takes the right club to pick a ruckman. Yeah. We know that. And he was probably on talent right around that end of first round type of area of the draft. But yeah, at his size, 202, he's going to be warehoused. Like, he's not going to be playing a lot of senior footy in the next year or two.
But those big players,
exactly right. But he can surprise, and you have to find the right club to pick him. And I think there's a few looking at him.
Could be a gem.
And that's why when you are talking about clubs like Melbourne, who have been heavily linked to him in the past, I know they've just brought Brodie Grundy into the football club, and obviously leads to the question, why would they be picking a ruckman if they've got 2 of the last 5 All-Australians in Brodie Grundy and Max Gorman on their list? But this is a player that might take 4 or 5 years to develop, and by that stage, Max Gorman will be coming to the end of his AFL career, and they'll be looking for the next guy to take the reins from him. I'm intrigued and fascinated by Cal, by how many ruckmen you think might actually go tonight, and whether or not there are more on the board a bit further on, and whether or not, if clubs at the top end miss out on someone like Harry Barnett, whether there are more later in the draft.
Yeah, there are a few. I don't know how many will get taken tonight. There are some with interest late. There's a boy called Max Noble who's 207, 208 centimetres, is still growing. So it's hard to find players.
That's ridiculous.
I'll put it this way, if Max Noble doesn't get picked at tonight or in the rookie draft tomorrow, he'll be one of the first players we call out in the mid-season draft next year. So that's the dilemma. Not a dilemma, but that's the thing that the clubs have to weigh up. Do we take this guy knowing that it's a long-term project, or do we wait and see if he gets through the mid-season next year after a bit more exposed form? But he's one from Gippsland Powell, the son of Trent Noble, former AFL player, of course, who's done a little bit of coaching across this year. Clay Tucker's another ruckman who's a chance at the Eastern Rangers program. Hudson O'Keefe, I think, is a possibility later on as well. And Cam Owens, a Tasmanian prospect who could be in the mix later on.
And you talk about the mid-season draft as well, but looking at the number of picks that each club has, say even a Hawthorn has quite a few, but could they look to save some of them so they have spots available for that mid-season draft?
Absolutely, mid-season and also the pre-season supplemental period as well. So you need to have a spot open, at least one, to be able to invite players to train with your club. And we've seen some great success stories out of the SSP over recent years. And Nick Martin was one this year for the Bombers, right up there in the Rising Star voting as well, out of an SSP signing being overlooked in multiple drafts. So, yeah, I think clubs are keeping that in mind. And like you say, the Hawks entered with, 6 or 7 selections, but we're only ever going to use sort of 4 or 5 at the draft. They do the deal. So it's all very fluid. But as I said at the start of the show, we had 21 picks in night one. I'm expecting there to be somewhere between 57 and 62 picks. I'll say 59 just for the sake of accuracy. Let's see if we're close later on.
Oh, I can't wait. We'll be counting down.
Remember the number?
No, the broadcast will finish it. Our coverage will finish
Right, I'll pick 59.
at 59 no matter what.
Oh, they're still picking? No, we're off.
No, sorry. Well, strap yourselves in because we have a big night ahead. We're probably about 10 to 15 minutes away from night 2 of the 2022 NAB AFL Draft kicking off. But in the meantime, one of the best things about the draft, of course, is the reaction of family, friends and the draftees themselves when their names are finally called out. Let's take a look at a little snapshot of what happened last night.
Matter of the averages do say that generally the guys who play well in their draft year are the ones born a little bit earlier, so that 6 to 8 months can sometimes be a big factor in the development when you're 17 and 18. So clubs will take that on board, and as I say, I think there's a lot of development left in him. Physically, I don't think he'll be stepping into an AFL backline next year, but there's a lot to work with as well.
The next player I want to talk about is a player I really have enjoyed watching at the Sandy Dragons. That's Ollie Houghton. I also liked what he produced at the draft combine, Riley, because he was really good. He tested well in the 20-metre sprint and the vertical jump as well, so he's got some explosiveness, doesn't he?
Well, that's the best part of his game. He's a great evasive player. He can mark, he can jump. He's got genuine X factor when he does play in the forward half of the ground as well. I just spoke to him at the draft combine and he said that he didn't really back himself to use that natural athleticism at the start of the year. He was playing things a bit safe, but it was the back half of the season when he started trusting his own natural abilities that he started playing better footy. He's has a lot of energy. He's a high impact player as a front half of the ground player as well. He's obviously the son of Trent Houghton, who played a couple of games for Collingwood and also for Carlton. I think he played 75 games in total. Never reached 100 for either club though, so he won't be eligible to join both as a father-son. He's a unique story as well in the sense that we asked him who he bagged for, was it Collingwood or Carlton? And he said, I'm 50-50. He bags for both sides, which you don't really see much of when you've got two rivals like that.
You can't bag for both Carlton and Collingwood. Like, that's weird.
Not many
that's
people
really
would
weird.
sit on that
It's like
fence,
saying you bag for Essendon and Hawthorn.
Yeah, doesn't make sense.
It wouldn't happen.
So I was just a little bit distracted and Nat's phone went off and it was her Be Real. That's what I was laughing at. I don't know.
Should we do a Be Real? Should we do a Be Real?
I don't really know what
I mean,
it
we've
is,
got
but
some time to kill because this is, what we're doing here. This is really great TV
just
at
on
the
Houghton
moment.
as well, I think that there's clubs inside the 30 who will look at him. Collingwood is a chance to take him with one of their 2 picks. If he got through to Freo's selection as well, that could be an option as well. So he'll be taking the first 10 or 15.
Yep.
I think tonight. The Bulldogs have been linked as well. I'm not sure if that's going to be for whatever their pick is, 25. I'm losing track of the numbers because of the bids and everything. And then their second one might more be their pick in the 30s that he comes into contention.
All right, here you go. Let's do a Be Real.
Be us. Didn't say that.
What great TV this is. Okay, let's move on because we do want to talk about some of the other players who are still available. And we mentioned Lockie Cowan, a Tasmanian. Well, there is another one. We haven't had that many Tasmanians drafted over the last few years, but Tom McCullum is another one of these, a key defender. Yeah,
I think people will probably see him as a potential surprise in this range of the draft. We haven't ranked him quite as highly as this throughout this season, but clubs clearly have. And he's around this mark. He's a 193 centimetre prospect. Played really well for the Allies across this season. I think what clubs like about him is his athleticism for a start, but his rebound and run and drive. So he's not a really polished player by foot, but what he lacks for there, he makes up for with real athleticism, strength, and as we see here, some of the take me on stuff that we get out of the back half is really exciting. So there are some clubs looking at him. It's hard to find that mix in key defenders. There aren't too many on the board at this point of the draft who can do the things that McCallum's been able to do across this year. A good player for the Allies in Tasmania. Been linked a little bit to North Melbourne. I think 26. He's going to be in their mix for their selection as well. And a few others as well. Maybe even the Swans, now that they're back in the 20s, could have a look at him too.
Max Grzuski is a really intriguing player to me because he can kind of play both ends, and as you can see there, 193 centimetres. Do you see him more as a defender?
It's a good question. I've seen him play good footy at both ends off the ground. Takes some good hangers, he's one. His hands and his marking is his weapon. That's his trick. That's what he's really, really good at. So even though 193 might not be quite at the 195, 196 size of other key backs in the pool, we just spoke about Lewis Hayes at 199 centimetres. Grzuski's a great grab, and he just managed to out body his players, whether front or in defence. So, yeah, good hands, knows how to get to the drop of the ball, and is a fierce sort of competitor as well. So every club's going to have a different view on where he fits in positionally, I think, and there's nothing wrong with sort of starting your career as a bit of a swingman as well, and knowing that you can do a bit of both, depending on what the job or role is for you on a certain day. But there's some clubs looking at him in the 20s as well. The Giants have been linked. I'm not sure if that'll be for the first pick they have or their next pick as well. He could still be on the board at that time. Would the Bombers have a look? Would Hawthorn have a look? St Kilda and Fremantle or others who have shown interest in him across this year?
All right, we're about 5 minutes or so away from the start of night 2 of the 2022 NAB AFL Draft, so stay with us here. Alwyn Davey Jr. Now, I think Essendon fans are going to fall in love with him. I certainly did when I interviewed him at the Draft Combine, and we've had him on the Road to the Draft podcast as well with his twin Jaden. Just a really lovely, lovely kid. Well, I guess he's still a kid.
Yep.
Oakley Chargers. What do you love most about Alwyn?
Well, I love that he's not just a small forward. He can go into the midfield, and that's where some of his best games have come across this year. So this was his best game of the year, playing for Vic Metro against the Allies, and he was terrific at times as well for Sandringham, for the Oakley Chargers. His best game for the Oakley Chargers this year came in Elijah Sardis's best game for the Oakley Chargers this year against the Sandringham Dragons late in the season. Set to join Sardis at the Bombers as a father-son pick. It's just a matter of where that bid comes now, really.
So they've got 25. They'll want it to go get past and hope the bid doesn't come before then.
And the indication is that will happen. I think it'd be a surprise now if the bid does come before that point. And sometimes once it passes the pick, sometimes those father-sons and academy players can just skip through a few more.
Well, they're lucky the Sydney Swans are at pick 27. So I'd say if the Swans were before, there might be some more bidding going on.
What's Riley calling them?
Bidney.
The Bidney Swans.
The Bidney Swans.
So
it's got a nice ring to it.
Again, it adds to their forward stocks, the Bombers, and he's got some tricks.
What about his twin brother, Jaden? Because Jaden's been out for most of this year with a serious knee injury. Where do you see him at? And just let our viewers know, what's he like as a player? Because he's more like Uncle Aaron.
Yeah, that's right. I think he's got some ability to play in the forward line as a small forward, go up the ground as well. And what we haven't seen of Jaden is just that exposed sort of footy against the top-notch opponent. So that's why there isn't too much vision of Jaden, because obviously we've been through COVID over the last couple of years in Victoria. He's been boarding at Xavier College with his brother as well in Melbourne, hence why he's been able to play for the Oakley Chargers.
Yep.
But in saying that, he hasn't played for them because he's been out for those back-to-back knee reconstructions. But tracking pretty well. Will take a long-term view once he gets to the Bombers officially. But I think it's probably most likely that a bid doesn't come for him and they just are able to grab him with their last selection.
All right, waiting for things just to kick off here on night 2, but it is the Giants who have the first pick of tonight's draft. That starts at pick 22. They also had the final pick of the first round, which was last night. They took Darcy Jones at pick 21. So we're just looking to see what they might do here, Cal. And I know in your Phantom draft, you had the Giants also selecting Braden George, and he'd be a real chance to go here, do you think?
Well, yeah, I'm barracking for that.
Obviously.
I think he's right in that mix. I think he'd have to be right in that conversation. I think Charlie Clark could be in that conversation as well. Jacob Ryan is a player who we haven't spoken too much about, but would be in the mix as well for a lot of clubs right at the top end. Lockie Cowan, who we spoke about just a little bit before. Harry Barnett's another who's garnered some interest. Do they need a young ruck to bring in their crew? They've also got a young ruckman coming through their academy, Nick Madden, who might be the young ruck they take potentially as a Category B rookie if he gets through tonight's draft. Look, there's other ones. West Coast have been linked a little bit to Barnett as well. The Bulldogs been spoken about with Charlie Clark and Braden George and Lockie Cowan if they get there. Lewis Hayes potentially in the mix for the Bombers, Braden George and Lockie Cowan. Again, Lockie Cowan likely to be firmly in the sights of North Melbourne at 26 if he was able to get to that point. What will the Swans do, I'm interested to see there? Could they take a flyer? Could it be Caleb Smith, who's been a late bolter, I guess you'd say, towards this year's draft? They've had some interest there. Could it be Bailey McDonald, another player with speed who's come on in the second half of this season, who the Swans have shown some interest in? Where does Joe Richards go, the small forward from Wangaratta, who's 22, turning 23 this year? Where does he end up? Because a number of clubs in that range, including Collingwood, Port Adelaide, Geelong a little bit further back, St Kilda, all going to have a look at Joe Richards, I think, and as a potential pickup. The Giants as well being one of the clubs who will look at him.
Now, the Brisbane Lions, are they completely done, Riley, now? They've got Will Ashcroft and Jasper Fletcher, the two that they picked up as father-son bids in the first round. Are they out tonight?
Yeah, they'll be done now, but, I mean, they've had their work done for them already. I mean, it would have been an easy night for Steve Knoll, their recruiting manager, in the sense that, yeah, match the bids on two of the best 15 players in the draft and then get out of there. I mean, and what an off-season it's been for them. We spoke a little bit about it last night, but a side that was in premiership contention already, finished top 4, made a preliminary final last year, adds Josh Dunkley into the football club, Connor McKenna into the football club, Jack Gunson into the football club, and then Will Ashcroft and Jasper Fletcher, who will be players, hopefully, for the Brisbane Lions for the next 10 to 15 years. So even though they won't be making another pick tonight, they've done so well up until this point. Their work in the trade period is to be commended for what they've managed to do. They've managed to find picks to match points to match those two bids on those players. So they've done exceptionally well over this summer. The pressure now builds going on to them next year, I think, given the sense that they probably in all likelihood will start among the premiership favourites, and deservedly so. I think they should be the premiership favourite going into next year, given the off-season they've had. So, yeah, it's going to be a fascinating and intriguing season for Brisbane in 2023, because I think the time is now for them to take that next step and really challenge for a flag.
So, Cal, the Fletcher bid came a little bit earlier than they had expected, but just to be clear, they didn't go into any deficit points-wise. They had enough.
They had enough. They did their work, and that's why they did that trade at the start of the trade, the draft, of the draft with the Hawthorn, and then obviously with North Melbourne as well, to boost their points, knowing that the bid was likely coming for Ashcroft at 2, and then obviously with Fletcher later in the first round.
And the Giants, Riley, what have you made of them so far? They've picked up 3 players already, soon to be a 4th. We believe Aaron Cadman, obviously, at 1, Harry Rouston, another midfielder, and then Darcy Jones as well, who is very versatile and can pretty much play anywhere.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, you look at the potentially the first players that might be chosen tonight, like the Charlie Clarks and the Braden Georges, and whether or not they did that side of their business late last night and getting Darcy Jones, who they see as starting his career as a small forward to the football club alongside Aaron Cadman. I'd pinpointed going into this draft period that I think their biggest need going forward was to address quite a threadbare forward line. I expect, even though they moved Harry Himmelberg into the back line last year, I'm fully expecting him to play forward again in 2023, Harry Himmelberg.
I liked what he did down back.
I did as well, but just speaking to a few people at the club, I'm fully expecting him now to go back into a forward role next year. So that's where probably be the main mentor for Aaron Cadman, his first season in the league, playing as that number 1 key forward for the Giants. They've got Darcy Jones now as a small forward. I still think they probably need to build out their midfield depth a little bit more. I know they got Harry Rouston into the football club last night, but with Tim Taranto and Jacob Hopper leaving the club during the trade period.
Tanner Bruin.
Bruin as well. The 2 or 3 of their best inside midfielders at the club. So I still think they do need to address that tonight. It's interesting they've got the first pick in the draft and they're already on the clock now, but the reason why this is so important, Cal, is to touch on that, is because whereas normally, and we saw last night, clubs had 5 minutes once they're on the clock to then make that bid, they've had a full 24 hours for clubs to come and call them. I spoke to a couple of clubs last night that said they were just waiting for the phone to ring throughout their 5 minutes. They knew who they were going to take, but they just wanted to make it sure just to see any contingency plans that clubs didn't come in with a godfather offer for that pick that they couldn't say no to. The Giants have had 24 hours now to get this right and to listen to phone calls and then to make their decision.
Well, they're on the clock now with about 4 minutes remaining are the Giants, and we do believe that they are going to use this pick, Cal. There was some murmurings throughout the day, of course, whether they might trade it, and there was a window, a 45-minute window before we got to 6:30, I think, between 5:45 and 6:30, where you could actually trade that. Nothing happened, so we just wait and see.
Yeah, and they get to the point now where they make the call on the player that they're going to take, and as the names we've been speaking about, I'd be surprised if it didn't come out of that group. Braden George, Charlie Clark, Jacob Ryan, Lockie Cowan, Harry Barnett. So they're all the guys who are going to be in the mix for this Giants pick. And look, is it a needs pick here? Do you have to weigh up, as you said, Riley, what you've already brought in? How much of an effect is that versus just picking the player that you think is the best at that selection, who's left over? So I think Braden George would be a nice addition. I think all of them would complement the group in different ways.
Just looking ahead as well, West Coast have got a couple of picks coming up too. And Riley, I'm keen to get your view. Just obviously a top 10 pick in Ruben Ginbey coming, and then Elijah Hewitt. But they haven't had a top 10 pick in a long time. I think it was since Andrew Gaff was taken. And they're starting this, I guess, rebuild. I'm not sure they want to call it a rebuild, but how important is it for West Coast to get this right?
Pretty important. I mean, we spoke last night about the fact they've only had 5 top 20 picks since they took Andrew Gaff in 2010, and of them only 3 remain in Dom Sheed, Liam Duggan and Campbell Chesser, who they took last year. So yeah, there's a lot of pressure for them to get it right. I think they had a really good night last night in bringing Ruben Jinby and Elijah Hewitt into their football club, two really strong midfielders for them that will hopefully provide the backbone for their midfield going forward. So I think for them, they can't necessarily address needs just yet. They just have to take best available player, because they've been without blue chip draft prospects for so long, primarily because of their finishing position. They've been such a consistent, successful side over the last decade or so.
And they gave up a lot for Tim Kelly also.
Yeah, so it's going to be an interesting watch for them coming up next. But the Giants, their pick is in.
All right, their pick is in. Well, we know they haven't traded it, that is for sure. So we take a look at what the Giants have done. Oh, wait for it. We need a drum roll. We need some sound effects, don't you think?
Oh, that's next year's draft night live.
It's coming.
Who is it?
Who is it? Tell us who it is.
It will be
one of those names that you talked
we've
about.
spoken about.
It's their fourth pick at the draft now. So.
And it's about who might get through to 30 and who might not as well.
Yes.
So you've got to weigh that up as well. We spoke about a few options who could be available at their next pick, and so they just bite the bullet here, which I think they have with Max Krzyzewski.
There we go, the defender.
Yeah, and the swingman. He's able to play both ends of the ground. We spoke about his interest from the Giants potentially in the 30s.
Yes.
And I think now they've probably thought, well, there's those clubs that other clubs we mentioned were interested in inside the 20s, and yeah, he's a nice selection here. I think that, you know, a boy from Caulfield Grammar as well, played some good footy there across this year and managed to, across multiple positions and multiple games, influence them. Missed a big chunk of the season with a knee injury in the middle sort of block of the year as well, and came back late in the year and managed to play in this game for Vic Metro and took a couple of grabs early and got involved. So, yeah, Max Krzyzewski goes there and bolsters, you know, their key department stocks.
At either end.
Yeah.
Could be at either end. He could be
That's
partnering
right.
Sam Taylor and Lech Lear and Nick Haynes down back. He could be partnering Harry Himmelberg and Aaron Cabin up forward. So they've got a bit of versatility there. Reminds me a little bit of Jeremy Howe and his marking ability. Not necessarily as high leaping as Jeremy Howe, but the way that he takes his marks and the way that he positions himself on the field, if he was to start his career as a defender, that's the player that he reminds me of. So they've got 4 down.
I wonder if they go
West Coast on the clock.
I wonder if they go for Joe Richards at 34. That'd be interesting if he's still on the board there.
Okay.
Do you expect them to use 34 and 51, their final 2 selections?
No, I think
Probably
they
just keep one up their
their
sleeve.
5th one.
Yeah,
I think
okay.
that if the right play's there, they use that one tonight, I believe. But now the Eagles are on the clock. And
They are. So we spoke about Jimby and Hewitt, so what do they need?
well, they've gone powerful midfielders to start, haven't they? And they've been linked to Kobe Bergiel as well, who's a prospect with genuine speed. So if they go for him here, or does he want more of the mix for the next selection? I think he's more of a chance to get through to the next selection. So if they wanted him there, they could probably run that risk. Whereas if you're going for Harry Barnett as a potential option here, I'm not sure he would get through to that point. So he's one of the names that I think will come up in discussions. Charlie Clark's been, you know, around this mark of the draft as well. I think Tom McCallum is a key defender, another tall who could be around there. But yeah, we've spoken a lot about Harry Barnett potentially being in the Eagles' sights, and they looked for Ruckman during the trade period as well. Lloyd Meek was a player that they did have a look at there.
Yes, okay.
Well, I mean, if Ruckman are hard to find and hard to come by, and they're looking for one, obviously with Nick Natanui towards the end of his career, then that sounds like a pretty good pick, and they have gone that way, Cal, so well done to you. Harry Barnett, the best ruckman in this year's draft pool, becomes an Eagle. He's a South Australian, so he'll be making the move over there. And what's his height again?
He's 202.
202. Still some room to grow,
And
do
growing,
you think?
and growing. Why not? Within a year, he might be 203. You never know.
But the fact
but
that he's
he can
had
jump.
some sample, like senior sample experience too, is pretty good.
And he can jump. I like that about him. There's some ruckmen, you know,
You can't jump.
Yeah, who aren't big jumpers. He's a jumper. He's a leaper. That's why we talk about the Grundy
leaper.
style. The Grundy style of player that he could be. So, look, another player out of South Australia who's had genuine interest. The Demons were among the clubs there. Obviously, Adelaide as well had some interest in getting back into the draft. Could have been for him. Also, Jacob Ryan might have been a chance for that too. So they add to their mix there. They've got 2 midfield stars at the top end and players who are ready to play straight away. I think it's a good-looking sort of crop of prospects that they can bring in.
Yeah.
It's looking very nice at the moment.
They needed their next long-term ruckman after Nick Naitanui. So he signed a 2-year contract extension just a couple of months ago. That'll take him through to 2024, and it will provide Harry Barnett with the perfect mentor to start his career next to someone like Nick Naitanui. That athletic type of jumping ruckman, someone the West Coast has targeted for a long time. Obviously, they've got Nick Nat in that position, but Callum Jamieson and Bailey Williams, two other players there, are other similar types to that. So it's a profile of player that West Coast have targeted before. But yeah, as we mentioned, they definitely did need another one. They lost Scott Lysette a couple of years ago after they won their flag in 2018. So it's probably a position they've needed to fill for quite a while now.
This will be interesting. I don't know if they go for Braden George or do they go with Lockie Cowan or Charlie Clark. I think they're the guys that I'd be expecting.
So they took Jed
Dogs.
Buslinger with their first selection, which ended up being 13 after a bid on Jasper Fletcher.
And you would think then, in light of that, they probably don't go for the double key backs in Lewis Hayes and also Tom McCallum. You'd think that they go for something a little bit different.
Especially given how well stocked they are already for key position talent. We spoke about that a little bit last night, and down back, and they've got players like Sam Darcy, who they could throw down there, but they just brought Liam Jones into their football club. They've already got Alex Keith and Ryan Gardner. And then forward of the ball, we've got Aaron Norton and Josh Bruce, and they've brought in, obviously, Rory Lobb as well. So they've got heaps of these types of players. So, yeah, maybe it is a smaller type, maybe it is a running type. I think they're in a pretty good position, though, the Western Bulldogs, just in terms of how they've managed to build out their list around the ground. I really like what they've been able to do. They've got strong quality and depth across the field, so they're going to find a good player here, I reckon.
All right, we'll see what they do. They've got about 2 minutes left, and then it's Essendon, North Melbourne and Sydney as well. As we project ahead, I mean, North Melbourne have already got Harry Sheasel and George Wardlaw. I know, Cal, on the road to the draft, we were getting a lot of questions about what North Melbourne were going to do with when it was pick 23, which is now, I think, 26?
Yeah.
What do you still think it might be Tom McCullum?
Yeah, I think he's a chance to be available at that point of the draft and right in their mix as well. I think one of the small forwards in Charlie Clark, if the Dogs don't take him here, and then the Bombers obviously overlook him as well, could still be in the mix for them too. So obviously a little bit depends on what happens next. But this is an interesting call because I'm not sure the Dogs would have expected Braden George to be available at this point. He's always going to be in that mix, and he's one of the interesting and more fascinating players off the pool in that we know he's not going to be playing in 2023. He did his ACL late in this season.
We've had that before because Elijah Hollins was drafted, wasn't he? Probably not going to play the year after.
No, that's right. And also Brody Kemp as well a couple of years ago. Probably an even more similar story in that he was going to sit out his next season.
All right, well, we'll see what the Western Bulldogs... Just a thought, the pick is in. I was just going to say a thought that maybe, given they bid on Jasper Fletcher, they might be preparing a bid for Alwyn Davey just to get in front of the Bombers and make them use their pick. But I'm not sure they've done that because they've taken Charlie Clark. So the Western Bulldogs, a tick for you, Cal. Well done with that one. He is now a Bulldog, which is great news for them. Yeah,
he's a go-getter, that's for sure. He kicks goals, he gets in the faces of opponents. I'm really interested in seeing the forward line work of Charlie Clark and Cody Waitman together. That's going to be an entertaining, antagonising...
They're going to tire each other out. They're so energetic.
They will. He's really crafty around goal. And as we said before, loves to celebrate in the big moments, had a really strong season for the Sandringham Dragons, kicking nearly 30 goals, and just managed to lift his side at different pivotal moments. There he is celebrating again. Look forward to his first goal at AFL level. I think we'll see a big celebration. But the Dogs clearly identifying that as a bit of an area too, because I think Jacob Constanti would have been amongst that conversation as well, should he have been available. So they get one of their guys through, and now we wait and see if Braden George is on the clock for the Bombers or a chance for the Bombers, because I think they're a club that should back in the talent and look for someone like that at this selection.
Just on the Western Bulldogs, they've got a couple more picks left. Do you expect them to use just the one? Or?
I think they'll use their next pick at 39, and I think that'll probably be it for them across the night. Potentially one later, but I think 39 is most likely to see them out.
Yeah, we'll get some passes, no doubt, towards the end. What did you say? 59?
59.
59 selections.
Nice.
All right, one to watch. So the Bombers are currently on the clock. It is 9 night 2 of the 2022 NAB AFL Draft. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have your company. Stay with us because we've got a long night ahead as we complete this year's draft. It was jam-packed last night, so much action, a little bit of drama with what we're calling the Bidney Swans just bid central there for a while as they worked out what they were trying to do, eventually trading the pick to Hawthorn. The Swans have got another pick in at 27 there, as you can see on the screen, after North Melbourne. So we wait to see what the Essendon Football Club does. Obviously, we know that Alwyn Davey Jr. will be joining the club at some point, but this won't be the pick that they're using to select him, Riley.
No, and that's a great thing for the Bombers, because I think probably a fortnight ago there might have been some concern that this pick, a bid for Alwyn Davey Jr. might have been made before this pick, and it would have then forced this pick out further in the draft. So the fact they've managed to retain 2 picks at the top end, they got Elijah Sardis in last night, they'll bring another one here, and then we know they're going to be a really nice prospect in Alwyn Davey Jr. later on in the draft. It's a really good thing for them. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do here. I agree potentially on the Braden George front, in the sense that I think they've needed a quality forward half player for quite a while now. So I'll be interested to see if they go down that pathway.
All right, we'll see what they do. I mean, Elijah Sardis, the pick is in. We'll just wait for that to come up. Do you reckon, Cal, he could play straight away?
Yes. Yeah, I think he will want to play straight away, and I think he can play straight away. I don't think that should be the expectation that he comes out of and is Chris Judd next year, but there is some capability for him to play straight away, that's for sure.
All right, so Lewis Hayes, the younger brother of Sam Hayes, Port Adelaide's ruckman, joins the Bombers. He is a key defender and very, very tall at 199 centimetres, and that is an excellent pickup for the Bombers.
Yeah, and adds to now their key position group, because only 2 years ago they grabbed a couple of key defenders in the draft, in Cody Brand and Josh Eyre. They've both been delisted this year, so they don't have a whole heap of young key backs coming through that system. They might pick up Eyre as a rookie tomorrow again, but yeah, he is a player who will be able to develop alongside Zach Reid potentially. Yes. Within that group. There's high hopes for Zach Reid. Might follow a pretty similar path in terms of building up his body and getting himself right physically before he's able to be playing senior footy. And again, that won't be the expectation straight away. But, you know, if you're learning next to Jordan Ridley about being an intercept defender, he was one of the best in the game over the past couple of years at doing that. And I think that's the role that he'll be playing down the track.
And Jaden Laverde's played a crucial role for them at the football club over the last couple of years. So he'll have some time to develop. Brendan Zirk-Thatcher's another prospect that's been coming through over the last couple of years. It's had a really good start to his career at Essendon as well. But I reckon they'll be looking at this pick, taking Lewis Hayes and thinking he's the man we're going to partner with Zach Reid for hopefully the next decade. And you'd hope that potentially maybe like a Harrison Jones could take the next step at the other end of the field and become a real consistent 40 or 50 goal kicker a year. They've had Peter Wright come through, one of their best and fairest this year, and just think these are our bookends now. If we can get Zach Reid and Lewis Hayes sorted for the next 10 years, then we're in a really good position defensively, and you can start looking at other ends of the field without having to worry about what's going on down back.
And a good position to break that drought since the last finals win in 04. Cal, North Melbourne.
Throw that in there.
Just going
that
through...
necessary, was it?
Yeah, it was. It actually was.
Unnecessary.
Looking at the list that the recruiters will have, they'll be crossing them off. Lewis Hayes is gone now. Who are North Melbourne looking at? Who is left on the list?
Tom McCallum's still there, so he's an opportunity for them potentially. Jacob Ryan's a little bit of the forgotten man in some ways, that he was looked at as a first rounder potentially. He might get through to the Pies next pick, and they'd be sweating on that because they're only a couple away now of getting him. Lockie Cowan's still on the board as well, Braden George, as we mentioned. So you'd think it'd probably come out of one of those guys, although they could come from this one a little bit left field, knowing that, and we have to keep this in mind, that this is essentially North Melbourne's last live pick of the draft.
Yes.
They have a selection later in the pool, which will be used on Cooper Harvey. That's already right. Nominated them as a national draft father-son, so it means that even if no bids come, he will be taken with their last pick. If a bid does come, which I think is unlikely, it's just going to move up and zoom up the board and grab him. So this is their last live pick. So if they want someone a little bit more, not obscure, but off Broadway pick, this is going to be it. And that's okay as well, because you know you're bringing in two as close to roll gold certainties as you can get at pick 2 and 3 in Harry Sheasel and George Wardlaw. So interested to see which way the Roos go here, and I think McCallum would be a chance under this scenario. I thought maybe if one of the smalls was still there, they might get taken. Would Ollie Houghton be part of that brigade as well. Don't know. He's probably a similar size to some of the other midfielders that are on their list already, that 182 centimetre midfielder. But yeah, I think that's some of the options available.
On Harry Sheezel, we spoke to him last night on Draft Night Live, night 1 of the draft, and he talked about how chuffed he was to find out that he was, I guess, the theme or the song this year, your draft song, was named after him. Just talk us through while we wait for this pick. How did you come up with She's Will Be Love? What's the artistic inspiration?
There's a few different suggestions, and that one did come through from an avid listener, and we appreciated that. And then within about 10 minutes, I'd put together the lyrics.
10 minutes. So you channeled your best Liam Gallagher.
Well, Noel Gallagher, to be honest, because Supersonic was written in 10 minutes, and that's one of their best songs at Oasis. But anyway.
That was good singing from both of you. You
just compared yourself to Noel Gallagher there.
All right, well, thank goodness that North Melbourne's pick is in, because we don't have to talk about that anymore, but we will show you that song a little bit later on in the show, so make sure you keep watching if you missed it. And here we go. North Melbourne have taken Braden George, and that is fantastic news for him because, as we said, we haven't seen much of him, unfortunately, this year with back-to-back knee injuries and now having a reconstruction. We'll see him miss all of next year. But Cal, this is something that you look at long term, and he certainly has so much talent.
Yeah, he's a terrific mark of the footy. He goes in the air, he's strong above the ball, he's tough, he kicks the ball a mile, he knows his way around goals. There's a lot to like about Braden George. The one thing you don't like is that he's got an ACL injury and he's going to miss all the next year, but it's a long-term pick, this one. I like this pick from the Roos. I think that they're in no rush, North Melbourne, and they have time on their side. They've just got a new coach on a 5-year deal. Clearly they're planning for the future, so he is going to be a part of that, and the talent doesn't disappear or fade just because of this injury that he's dealing with at the moment. He's going pretty well with his recovery. Spoke to him not too long ago about that, and he's tracking quite well and keeping pretty positive about it. So been a frustrating year for him, but probably a long wait overnight as well, but a chance to go last night, a chance to go early tonight, but finds his home now, and I think it's a good selection from the Roos.
No, it would have been a difficult year for him, but with these things, they always make you a little bit more resilient. That's
true, and you learn things from it, and he's taken that approach. He's heard from other ACL victims, I guess you call them, in the AFL ranks that have reached out and spoken to him at different points. So he has got some good support around him throughout, dealing with that injury, and he's a really explosive player.
I reckon you looked at North Melbourne's forward stocks pre-trade and draft period, and you might have thought, do they need a key position player? But they've got a lot of players now that over the next couple of years can complement each other in a way. So you've got Nick Larkey, who's the key position player there, but then Cam Zurhaar, Paul Curtis, Harry Sheezel, who they added last night, and Braden George as well, are 4 players that are really difficult matchups. They might not necessarily be key position players, but they're really interesting matchups and hard to match up on players. And you wouldn't want to be an opposition coach in charge of the defensive group that's going to have to play against them. As we said, Sydney's pick is now in.
All right, well, this is actually the pick that Sydney got as part of that trade with Hawthorn. When Hawthorn moved up to pick 18, Sydney got this in return, as well as a future second and a future third. And they have selected Cooper Vickery from the Gippsland Power. Now, he's had a pretty consistent NAB League season, though, Cal.
This is really interesting in that because they did that deal with Hawthorn. He's a member of the Hawthorn Next Generation Academy. The Hawks would have been hoping that he gets through past pick 40 so they could have access to match the bid.
But they can't do that now.
But they can't match the bid under the NGA rules. So he was tied to Hawthorn's academy system. The Swans have got in before the cut-off point, and now he's their player. So clearly when they're doing that deal...
What is Kinnear doing?
No, he just picks a player now that he didn't have to bid on. He got sick of bidding last night. Clearly he's just gone and grabbed the one he didn't have to bid on. But Cooper Vickery, he's got some speed off half-back and through the wing. There's certainly some dash about his game. So, yeah, that is an interesting pick. Hawks fans will be disappointed because there was a hope that he'd get through past pick 40. And I think that was the broader view that he would be able to do that. And certainly Hawthorn was crossing their fingers that he was able to achieve that. But they moved back in the draft, and the Swans have pinched their player.
72 kilos too, Riley. He's quite light framed.
Yeah, but he'll have development ahead of him over the next couple of years. It's interesting in the sense that Jake Lloyd, who was a free agent this year, opted to re-sign with the club, so he'll be there for the next couple of years. So they've got the time to be patient with his development. And obviously Nick Blakey, who's played a really good role in that position off half-back over the last couple of years. It was an area that we thought Sydney would target coming into the night. They'd been linked to a lot of players who sort of played this half-back rebounding role, and Cooper Vickery is a player that's got that penetration, that's got that drive, and can provide that for the Swans over the next coming years.
2.93 seconds over
quick.
20 metres. So
wow.
Genuinely looking at some speed there. And in bringing in he and Jacob Constanti, clearly they've identified that as a bit of a need, the Swans, with their first two selections.
Very interesting. So do they have any more selections? I think they've got a couple of later picks. There you go. We see them there, 40 and 62 and 75. What's the feeling with the Swans? Would they maybe take one or two more?
Yeah, I think so. I think 40 will be used,
Yep.
if not, up for trade. Obviously, there's some possibilities there, but that's a chance, yeah.
So the interesting thing here is that Jacob Ryan was a player that was linked to Collingwood for such a long period of time in the first round, and whether or not now,
Well,
given the fact...
they did that pick pretty quickly.
Yes, they did. Whether or not he's now a player they're looking at here, thinking, geez, I can't believe that he's made it through again. Obviously nabbed Ed Allen, who was a player that was too good to pass up on with their first round pick last night. So whether or not Jacob Ryan is a player that's going to be on the board, he
is indeed. So Jacob Ryan goes to the Collingwood Football Club and becomes a Magpie. He is a tall, running defender we spoke about before, and he did that 2K time trial in about 6 minutes and 15 seconds, and he's going to be a cult figure, as you said, Cal, down at what's
at
it
the
called?
Pies.
What's their sentence?
AIA Centre.
Yeah, there you go.
The AIA Centre. Yeah, averaged 20 touches for the SA side at the championship, so it was a pretty consistent player for there. As we see, can go in the air and take grabs, and also be a runner and be a running carry player for them as well. So he is a prospect who, I can see streaming down the MCG wing with the mullet flowing and the Collingwood supporters behind his back, but fits into that high back role potentially to start his career. Can play on the wing as well.
All right, so...
I was going to say, they've already got a fan favourite down there in Braden Maynard, so it's a nice little 1-2 punch with him and Braden Maynard across half-back going forward.
And another athletic player, you've got Ed Allen that they selected last night, and then now Jacob Ryan. So great start for Collingwood in the draft. As we look at West Coast back on the clock, they've had Ruben Ginbey and Elijah Hewitt that they picked up last night. Two locals, then they went Harry Barnett. I wonder what they're going to do here, Cal. What are your thoughts?
Well, we've thrown up Kobe Bergiel as being an option. He's definitely got some speed and versatility, so he, I think, could be a player who is looked at. Lockie Cowan is still available too, so he's an option. Tom McCallum, the defender from Tasmania. Ollie Hotton's another midfielder who's potentially around this part of the draft. Is this the point where the bid comes in for Alwyn Davey Jr.?
Yeah.
Possibly. It doesn't really matter too much at this point now for the Bombers, that they're in a good spot to do what they need to do. So there are some names that I think will be right in the mix for this fourth pick for the Eagles, and they might have a later pick. They might use their later pick. They might also have to match a bid potentially on Tyrell Dewar later in the piece as well.
Let's not forget as well, we're seeing a very similar pattern to what we saw in 2021, in the sense that no one's trading out of these picks.
No.
So the second night of the draft and the early picks in the second night of the draft have traditionally been a point of the draft where clubs have had 24 hours to canvass what the market is for these picks, and a lot of them have been traded in years gone by. But last year we saw a swing from tradition in the sense that Fremantle opted to keep their pick, and then I think North Melbourne was next on the clock and opted to keep their pick, and then I think it went 10 or 12 picks before someone eventually made a trade. The same thing's happening now, in the sense that I think we've gone, 6 or 7 picks on the second night of the draft, and everyone's opted to retain their own selection.
Is that?
I think that you can sort of sell yourself on players that are coming through now. So obviously Jacob Ryan was a player, for example, that Collingwood would have been looking at in the first night of the draft. He's now made it through to their second pick in the draft. You've got to be patient and just see, well, can things actually work out in a way where we're able to nab the player that we might have taken in the first round? Melbourne's a good example of it last year, in the sense that they considered Blake Howes with the first pick in the draft. They ended up taking Jacob Van Roy, and then he was available with their second pick later on in the night. They got both players that they had next on their board at that first pick. So it's just it's an interesting one to watch, and I think clubs now probably can sell themselves on why you should take a player, and maybe potentially, Cal, that there's not enough of a market being generated for the picks at the top of the order. I think a lot of clubs saw what happened in the NBA and the NFL, where drafts go over 2 separate nights, particularly in the NFL, and the first picks on the second night and the third night are always the most valuable. I think clubs in the NFL spend draft picks more willingly. I think clubs potentially at the start of this period, when two-night trading was brought in the AFL, thought we can spend a bit more liberally as well, and they haven't actually been, and then they've sort of scaled back from there in the years gone by.
No, I think that's right, but also what the market is and what the draft's been the last couple of years as well, and the COVID-affected pools and development of that too. So interested to see what that looks like, and that's where you need to have a futures market operator within your recruiting team. You need to know what you're trading out of next year. I think sometimes clubs overvalue future picks, and Kenny Beatson spoke about that the other day about being the unwrapped Christmas present.
There we go. So West Coast, with pick number 29 in the 2022 NAB AFL Draft, have selected Kobe Bergill. Talk to me, Cal, about where you think his best position is. We know that he's quick and he's speedy. That's his best asset, but he can kind of play in a few different positions.
Yeah, I think he's a ball winner through the midfield. He can go forward. He's kicked a few goals at stages this year for Gippsland as well, about 15 across this season. So can win about half of his ball in contested situations. And then, as you mentioned, that really quick, 2.88 seconds in the combine 20-metre sprint, and I think it was 2.85 seconds at the start of the season in the NAB League. So he can really go, and I think the mix, what we're seeing there is that clearly the Eagles wanted some pace throughout their midfield and wanted these players to be brought in and add some real dash through that area. And Jimby's quick, Hewitt's quick. Barnett's actually quite quick for a tall player. Runs a 3 second.
I really like what West Coast is doing here.
And Kobe Bergill as well as a player who is able to do that too. So, yeah, I think the mix they've got is really strong, and he's a good selection for them there. And now the Saints are on the board, and interested to see what they do here as well. They've been linked to a few tools.
Collingwood, I think.
Collingwood, sorry. Yep. Saints up next as well. Collingwood, at this point, well, is it Ollie Houghton? Is it Isaac Keeler? I think this is the point where he gets into the mix for the draft as well. Of course, the Crows haven't nominated him as a next generation academy player, so he's in the open pool. Key forward / ruckman from South Australia. Lockie Cowan is probably a little bit similar to Jacob Ryan in that is that high half back. Don't know if you'd go for two of them on the back of Ed Allen, who's that taller type as well. So yeah, that will be interesting. And Alan Davey is still on the board.
Coming?
I don't think it'd be here, but you do never know. Or do they look at Joe Richards? They've also been a club that's been right across his work as a small forward in the country league.
All right, so recapping what Collingwood have done so far, they've had Ed Allen and Jacob Ryan. That was last night when they took Ed Allen, which was a fantastic selection from them, and then Jacob Ryan they took a few selections ago, Riley. I mean, they're just incredible when you think about Collingwood coming from 17th on the ladder in 2021 to where they were nearly making a grand final in 2022. Their trajectory, do you expect it to keep on tracking upwards?
I reckon it's going to be a really intriguing watch to see how Collingwood goes in 2023, because was last season them reverting to what they should have been in 2021 was the odd one out, or was 2022 the odd one out? They obviously won a lot of close games last year, and will they revert to being more of the side they were in 2021? So it's going to be interesting to watch to see how they go. They're also going to change. They've also changed their list a little bit dramatically as well. As we see, there's actually been a trade. So Collingwood and Carlton have made a trade there. Pick 30 to move.
So Carlton has traded its future second round pick to Collingwood for pick 30.
Okay.
So
and the Blues
Collingwood's
tapped out.
Okay.
So the Blues had put this on the radar back when we spoke to Nick Austin, their list manager on Trade Radio, about a month ago, Cal, that said they were looking to get another pick inside the top 30. They've obviously got 32 as well. They took Ollie Hollands last night. So this has been something that's been on their agenda for quite some time, and they wanted another pick in and around this range.
Yeah, they did, absolutely. And now that gives them a shot at a couple of players in succession nearly. So Jackson Binns, I think, would be in that mix. Ollie Houghton could be in the mix as well, potentially.
Two Ollies, that'll be confusing.
I hadn't thought of that. So there's a few players who I think from a running point of view could be contenders.
So they've clearly got their eye on someone then.
Yeah,
Riley,
100%.
I think Jackson Binns is one to watch here. I'm intrigued to see what they go there. Do you think Collingwood will try and get back into the draft, Cal, or do you think that'll be them done?
I think they've got a later pick as well that they can activate.
In the 50s, I think.
I don't know if they will come back in though at this point.
Okay.
I think they've been really open, as Derek Hines spoke about on our Draft Night Countdown show earlier this week, in potentially moving out and just having the two picks. So they've got some rookies that they are able to sort of move around there as well. So I'm not sure if they will participate any more here. That they'll try and trade the pick in the 50s as well.
Hey, well, if that's it for Collingwood, then Ed Allen and Jacob Ryan, that's a pretty good selection.
Not a bad, not a bad 1-2 punch.
All right, so the pick is in. We just wait to see what is happening here. As you say, Cal, there are quite a few quality players left on this list as we wait to see what the Blues might do. So just recapping, if you've joined us, they've traded up into the Pies pick 30. They traded a future second and they've taken the Tasmanian, the team from Devonport in Lockie Cowan, which is great news because I was going to ask you next, Cal, like, are you surprised that he hasn't been picked up yet in the top 30? But here we go.
Well, clearly the Blues were surprised that he wasn't picked up yet because they've moved up knowing that if you go up, he's the player you're going to get because you don't go up with any doubt.
No.
That's why clubs wait before they really make that decision to trade up for any benefit in case someone jumps in ahead of them and grabs the player they want and then you're stuck holding a player you didn't actually go for. So they clearly target him for that. They back themselves to be a good team next year, Carlton. So would expect that their second round of next year is deeper into the season, into the 30s than their one this year.
Yeah.
So I think that Collingwood wanted to get out and bank up their selections and yeah, he adds a little bit across their half-back line.
Something just clicked for me as well because I look at Carlton's list and I think they've got a lot of running defenders: Sam Doherty, Zach Williams, Adam Sard, Nick Newman, Jordan Boyd, who they brought through this year. But then I just remember we spoke to Carlton coach Michael Voss on Draft Night Countdown on Friday, and he hinted with the fact that he really liked what Sam Doherty was able to do as a pure midfielder towards the back end of last year. So I wonder if this is done with that in mind, that they see the next phase of Sam Doherty's career being as a pure midfielder, and that's why they've targeted another running defender here. They're now 2 from 2 on bringing in childhood Carlton supporters to the football club as well, with Ollie Holmes and Lockie Cowan.
You might be a chance.
There you go.
My dream is still there.
What kind of player would Riley be, Cal? How would you describe him?
I think we'd be talking about him tomorrow.
The pre-season rookie draft, 3 o'clock by the way, Australian Eastern Daylight Time, so make sure you join us. Really outside. Oh, he's soft. I see where we're going here. Okay, so St Kilda is on the clock. This is their first selection on night 2 of the draft. Last night they took Mateus Filippo, which is an excellent selection for them at pick 10. So he was a top 10 pick in the end, the South Australian. So we look and see what St Kilda might do here. Riley, what do they need?
Well, I think they still need more midfield quality. I like the Filippo addition in the sense that he gives their midfield a bit of a point of difference. I mean, they've got some bigger body ball winners that we spoke about last night, and Brad Crouch and Jack Steele and Seb Ross, who had a really good season. I think they need a bit more X factor through that midfield. Mateus Filippo will obviously give them that, so that's something they can go forward and take on board as well. But that and forward half quality. I think that when they have to rely on Jade Gresham to go into the midfield, they lose that little bit of X factor in their 50-metre arc. So, yeah, I think they're the two main needs for the Saints. There's
a few who could be in the mix here. James Van Ness is a key back, is a possibility. I think they've shown some interest there in him around this point of the draft. Isaac Keeler, again, a player who is going to be drafted roughly in this area. Jackson Binns as a running wingman / half-back. You can play a little bit all around the square is an option for them too. So yeah, there's some players who I think will be around the mark for this pick at the Saints.
I'm also getting some irate text messages from Hawthorn supporters who are not pleased about the Cooper Vickery move by the Sydney Swans, obviously taking and snagging Hawthorn's NGA player in Cooper Vickery at pick 27. So Lockie Cowan is now a Blue at pick 30. We enter pick 31, St Kilda with about a minute and a half to go here. As I mentioned, it's their second selection, but their first for tonight, Cal.
Another player they've shown some interest in as well, and it could be for their next one potentially, is Jaden Mager, a goal kicker in South Australia, who's an electric half forward who's done some really exciting things across this season too. He's got one of the better highlights packages as well. So we wait and see which angle they take on this pick, because they do have this hold of this part of the draft in a way. They've got these two selections. They've been another club that has been looking to see if they could somehow package up their selections or bring a suite of picks together and get an extra pick inside that top 25 or so. That didn't happen, but now they're on the board here, and maybe they're happy enough with the players that they saw getting through anyway. And
we should mention, Fremantle fans have been oh so very patient, because they've had to wait through all of night 1, and what are we at 7:47? Probably about an hour or so into night 2, and they still haven't made a selection. But don't worry, Freo fans, coming at pick 33 in a couple of picks, you will have your first player of the draft, unless of course you trade that pick. The pick is in, of course, from St Kilda, and Cal, James Van Ness is their selection.
Yeah, as we thought he was going to be in the mix. He's a player who they've definitely looked at recent times as a key back, and he can do some really exciting things as well. He's a good mark above his head. He's played some strong footy this season for Vic Country and the Greater Western Victoria Rebels too. So yeah, certainly a prospect who can leap in the air and shut down opponents too. So yeah, I think there's a lot to sort of grow and develop with James Van Ness, and he was a player who also had a fair bit of interest in this area of the draft as well. I think there's a few clubs behind this pick that were looking at him closely, and he could have been in the mix for Hawthorn with one of their later picks. If Port Adelaide still was there with their selection, what they would have done, I think he would have been well and truly in that conversation too.
They brought in Zane Cordy, obviously, throughout the trade period as a free agent, as a key defensive option for them. They've got Josh Battle, Dougal Howard and Callum Wilkie. Carlton back on the board here now with their second pick in 3. I reckon this will be the one for Jackson Binns, Cal. They've targeted runners throughout this trade and draft period. They've obviously already brought in Ollie Hollands, who's one of the best. So I think Jackson Binns will be a player to be right in their sights here.
Okay, we'll see what Carlton do. Obviously, they've had a couple of picks in a row. 2 lifelong Carlton fans becoming Blues in Oliver Hollands and Lockie Cowan, which is great news. Are there any more Carlton supporting draft hopefuls on the list there, Riley?
They'd be getting their hopes up right now, I reckon, if they were.
It should be part of the draft information sheet when you lodge your nomination, your date of birth, your team you barrack for, just in case, down the track.
Now, when I did mention Fremantle as well not having a pick, we also haven't seen Port Adelaide make a selection
or Richmond
either. Richmond. So there's a few fans. Richmond, they're going to have to wait a very long time.
Yeah, Matt Clark and Blair Hartley and Will Thurston on the team, they're feet up still at the moment. They don't have any picks that they can really trade either, given they
did all their work in the trade period.
So they don't really have much to do until much, much later, but Fremantle's pick is coming up in a second as well. But yeah, as you say, Jackson Binns has been sort of spoken about a fair bit in this part of the draft, and has some toe. He can move, and they've clearly looked at that with their first couple of selections.
Top Binns.
Have you been sitting on that for a while? Oh, man. This is going to be a long night if you continue to pull out jokes like that.
And still Alan Davey, no bid.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the Bombers must be absolutely laughing. Who are you predicting is going to make a bid?
Eventually someone...
When's Sydney up next?
Yeah, that's true. I'm having a look here. Oh, no, they're not for a while, 40.
Eventually somebody's going to just say, well, he's just too good. We might not have done as much work on him. And that's what happens with these father-sons. And we saw it with the Saints boys last year, Marcus Windhager and Machito Owens as well. They slipped through a little bit just because of that reason, and they were able to get through a few more selections than most would have previously predicted.
All right, well, the pick is in for Carlton. We wait for a name to come up. Is it Jackson Binns, Riley, as you have predicted? Here we go. It is. So one of the hardest runners in this year's draft finally becomes a Blue. Well done to you.
Well, it's something that Carlton's targeted, as we've mentioned, for about the last 2 or 3 trade periods. I think they came to a point in their list where they realised they needed 2-way runners throughout the midfield. It was certainly a point of emphasis for them last year when they brought in George Hewitt and Adam Chera into their football club, and it's been a point of emphasis for them this year as well when they brought in Ollie Hollands with their first pick, and of course Jackson Binns here now with pick 32 as well. And let's not forget, they also targeted a move for Jack Graham a couple of years ago, though unsuccessful in that pursuit, but another one who's got extreme running power. So it's an area of their midfield group that you sort of almost need if you've got a player like Patrick Cripps, who's such a great contested and clearance ball winner, but has been long working on the spreading part of his game. So these are the types of players that enable Patrick Cripps to do what he does best and become the player that he was in 2022 when he won the Brownlow medal.
And he's got that great mix of agility as well. He was second in the agility at the combine, third in the 2-kilometre time trial too. So if you can move all day and then weave through traffic as well, it's a fair start to how things are going. Now, this Fremantle pick is interesting in that it's
the first one.
The first time they've picked outside of the top 30 since 2004.
Wow.
To start their first selection.
Right, okay. Who'd they grab then?
That was a good player. A little bit before my fandom draft picking in that one. I'm not sure who they're going to take here, but I do think that Ollie Houghton will be right in contention. I know they've got a pretty good midfield group coming through, but I think he'd be a player who would be in the conversation for that selection because of what he's been able to do across this year. Still on the board at that pick, They've also spoken about going for key defenders as well.
Yeah.
So which of the key defenders is available to? There's a few clubs looking for key defenders in this area of the draft as well. And there's one.
And they have picked a key defender. Look at you, Cal. Hugh Davies from the Claremont Football Club. So a WA boy. They've gone for the local, which is great news for him. Just tell us a little more about Hugh Davies.
Yeah, 196 centimetre player and played some good footy this year for WA and for Claremont as well. Pretty mobile when he gets around the ground. He can stop, but he can also back himself in the air and uses the ball pretty comfortably out of defence as well. So they get a local prospect. Didn't test at the combine due to some injury there, but what we have seen across this year, we've seen enough, I think, to know what he does well, and clearly Fremantle really prioritised that as a position.
And they lost Griffin Logue, of course, throughout the trade period, who went to North Melbourne, who was able to, I know he played forward a fair bit last year, but was able to provide a bit of key defensive support for them. He'll complement players like Luke Ryan and Alex Pearce, and they've got Heath Chapman and Brendan Cox as well that can play those sort of roles.
Is it just me, or are there a lot of key defenders in this year's draft, Paul? I feel like more than usual, Cal.
I always say that the key defenders shorten as the draft gets closer, like in a way that clubs start to realise closer to that. Well, they always realise it, but when it gets closer to the draft, it's like, oh, these guys become hot property in the second round of the draft. Key defenders often get taken in the second round of the draft because the first round is those midfielders who've dominated through their draft years and done the really exciting things. Not everyone loves key backmen, but they're important and they're pretty integral.
So important. I love them.
Yes.
Well, we spoke about it a bit yesterday with Max Michelini, that sometimes the best key defenders are the ones that never get spoken about, but they're the hardest to play on because they don't do the flashy intercept marking, they do the lockdown roles.
So you don't notice them as much. Yeah, it's crazy. They do the hardest work on the footy field and we don't notice them. So we're sorry about that, key defenders. The Giants, their pick is in as we wait to see what they might do. Riley, Aaron Cadman, Harry Rouston, Darcy Jones and Max Grzuski was their pick with the first pick of tonight's draft. So they've already got 4 very good selections. What do you think they still need? One of everything. Oh, and
they still need a player called Toby McMullen.
They
obviously.
do, who is a forward. And we talked about the fact that they need to bolster their forward line. They've got Aaron Cadman in, and now they've got Toby McMullen.
Yeah, he's a small forward, this one, Toby McMullen, 182 centimetres. Really a player of potential because he's come on this year a little bit behind the pack. He played from Port Fairy and has been up boarding in Melbourne and will play for the Sandringham Dragons as well across this season. But yeah, I really like what we've seen from him. He's pacey, he's smart, he's clever with the footy in his hands, and there's just something to him that I think there's a little bit of upside with him. So get into a system. He was one of the really best performed players at the Combine, ran 2.88 seconds for the 20-metre sprint. He's the son of former Bomber and Magpie Ian McMullen. Little quirk about him too. I was hoping to get picked by Fremantle.
Yes.
Because his cousins, Dave and Ed McMullen, are on the Fremantle recruiting team. So I would have thought, and they missed him.
They did. They had the opportunity. Oh, no.
I overlooked him.
How awkward is like Christmas dinner going to be? Or Christmas lunch?
Like McMullen's house?
Yeah, it's going to be a bit.
No, I'm not sure. But definitely, Toby is a player of talent and I don't think we've really scratched the surface in terms of what he can be.
Could he play in the midfield? Like, is he the type of player who starts as a small forward and then maybe...
Potentially, yeah. I think just the bits and pieces from his athleticism would suggest that he's got the running capacity to do that.
Yeah, and I think their last 3 picks are 3 players who have got a little bit of versatility. Because I think Darcy Jones is a player that I think can play midfield minutes throughout his entire AFL career. Max Grzuski is another one that can play at either end of the field. And now, obviously, with Toby McMullen, they've got some flexibility and some versatility with these last 3 picks, having taken Aaron Cadman and Harry Rouston, who they knew they were going to get before the draft even started with their first 2 selections.
Okay, now I think there is a trade that has just come in. So the Adelaide Crows have traded pick 79 and a future second and third round selection to the Gold Coast Suns for pick 43 and a future second and third round selection.
So we did speak
a little bit
at the top
later.
of the show, Cal, that Adelaide had been a club having matched the bid for Max Michelini that had looked to try and get back into this year's draft, and they now do with pick 43.
Yeah, so 43 the Adelaide Crows have, and yeah, as we mentioned, Max Michelini is who they took. That father-son, obviously his dad Jim played 211 games with Norwood in the sample, which meant he was eligible to go to the Adelaide Crows. So that's what the Adelaide Crows have done so far. As we wait for St Kilda, they've got 2.5 minutes left on the clock here already tonight. They've done a little bit of work. They took a key defender in James Van Ness. Last night they took Mateus Filippo with their first pick in the draft, which was pick 10. again. So they've got a couple of very handy selections there, and we spoke, Riley, too, about their need for a bit of X factor, which we think Mateus will provide in the midfield. And now they've got a third pick. What are we thinking?
I still think we spoke about it before. Obviously, they got the key defender with their second pick, having taken Mateus Filippo with their top 10 selection. They probably do need a bit of forward half quality, I think, at some point throughout the night. It's something that they've targeted for a long period of time, just to provide that little bit of support for the likes of Jade Gresham, who is able to play through the midfield, through the forward line. Jack Higgins has done that at certain points as well, but had a bit of inconsistency throughout the year, dropped out of the side on occasion throughout the season in 2022. So I think they need another player that's able to provide a little bit of excitement in the forward half for them.
All right, the pick is in as we take a look at what the Saints have done here with their third selection in the draft, and they've taken Ollie Houghton, so a midfielder with the Sandy Dragons, and I think he was left out of the Vic Metro program initially, Cal, but once he came back in, he sort of made some waves, and in particular the NAB League Grand Final, he had 25 touches and a kicked a goal.
Yeah, he was terrific in that game and one of the best on ground in that performance for the Sandy Dragons. Been pretty dynamic across this year as well, and for Vic Metro too. Kicked a few goals in this game down at Geelong against South Australia that really pushed him into the second round mix. And I know some clubs actually had him sort of viewed around that top 20 mark as well within their own boards. So there's certainly an interest in him around that point of the draft. I think this is a good pick for the Saints.
Yeah.
They like their local boys as well. Down the road in Sandringham, obviously not eligible for father-son, but the son of Trent Houghton, the former Blue and Magpies players. I didn't play enough games there, but a very different player to his dad, who is a tall type, rather than Ollie, who's 182 centimetre midfielder. Matthew Lloyd at Haileybury College speaks very highly of Ollie's footy this year, and he's a consistent player who basically just turns up and plays. He's athletic, he's driven 2.92 seconds over the 20-metre sprint as well.
And he is that player that we spoke about, that player that can provide a bit of X factor in the forward line. We spoke about it before, we were previewing where he would go, that he's got that natural athleticism. He can leap, he can jump, he can kick exciting goals, he can win his own footy. So he is that player in the forward half of the ground that can help to complement the likes of Jade Gresham and Jack Higgins. As we welcome Port Adelaide to this year's draft.
Yes, hello Port Adelaide, and welcome to you. Pick number 36, Cal.
I think this is most likely to be Tom McCullum.
Okay.
So I think he's a really good chance to be in the mix there as a key defender. And look, they've been looking for key defenders around that point of the draft. And this would be a good choice because he's got that agility.
Yes.
He plays in that Port brand in terms of that attacking, athletic style of play as well in what he can do offensively and be that rebounder. So I think that would be a good choice if they go that way.
They've long needed a bit of key defensive depth, and you mentioned that they've tried to get it throughout the trade period, but they don't have much beyond Tom Jonas and Tom Cleary and Alira Lear and Trent McKenzie down there. So if it was to go that way, then I think this would be a smart choice for them.
All right, the pick is in, so we wait to see what they have done. Have they done as Cal has predicted? Which, based on your Phantom draft last night, the first 13 pretty much spot on, and they have taken the defender from Tasmania, from the Tassie Devils, in fact, in Tom McCullum, and we thought maybe he might be a surprise selection for North Melbourne. They went in a different direction, but he is super athletic.
Yeah, definitely in the mix for a few clubs from that North Melbourne point onwards, and a number of clubs. Another key defender drafted in this part of the period. So yeah, we see some of his run and go, and that's what he does like to do. He's got really good athleticism that allows him to play on a number of different opponents, can be the tall or the smaller types, and really is up for the task and has that courage as well when he's going back with the flight of the ball to stop and intercept. So yeah, there's a lot to like about him, and I think there's a fair bit of development left in him as well.
Good pick from Port Adelaide. They waited this long to get into the draft, given they've had a very good trade period where they brought in a player called Jason Horne-Francis, who we know about
Who's
from
that?
years gone by in the draft.
We spoke about him a lot.
Yeah, but they have addressed a key need here. We would have highlighted it going into this period, this player movement window, where they needed key defensive depth, and they've come and got one here at pick 36. As Hawthorn gets back on the clock.
Yes, so Cam Mackenzie was their first selection with pick 7 last night. Then they did the trade with the Sydney Swans, as you can see there, and took Josh Weddle. Hearing Sam Mitchell talk about him today, it looks like he might be playing in the midfield as we wait to see what Hawthorn has done here. They missed out on Cooper Vickery, who was one of their NGA players. The Sydney Swans nabbed him with the pick that Hawthorn had traded off in 27 to get in and get Weddle at 18. So a little bit of drama. I like it, and we'll see what Sam Mitchell and the Hawks recruiting team have done here. And they've taken Henry Hustwaite, Cal, and a Victorian. His brother is the co-captain of Collingwood's VFL side.
Yeah, and been through the system with the Dandenong Stingrays in recent years as well, has Henry Hustwaite. Look, he's grown. He's a bit of a late developer in that he's a taller midfield type, uses the footy well on his left side. Probably more of a traditional type of Hawthorn pick over the years, one of these skillful users. Got a bit of that Jack Scrimshaw ability on the left side there. So
Another left footer.
Had about a 15 centimetre growth spurt, so still took those traits that he had as a smaller type when he had to rely on his kicking into the midfield and can play potentially on a wing or half back as well and be a driver and deliverer of the ball. I do wonder if he's a different player to Cooper Vickery, but they didn't get Cooper Vickery. Wonder if they had that sort of targeted as a bit of a need in terms of that sweeping type of player, so he could potentially play that type of role.
It's interesting, we spoke to Mark McKenzie on Draft Night Countdown, who said they were after bigger on-ballers and bigger midfielders.
They don't have.
It was a point of difference for them yesterday when they took, or last night when they took Cam Mackenzie with the first round selection. Now to get back into the draft and take Henry Hustwaite here, whether or not if they see him being an on-baller throughout his career, whether or not they thought to themselves, right, we need a bit of size, we need to be bulked up in this midfield group, and then the two players they've got now.
All right, so we wait and see what the Ds have done. This is actually the last pick of round 2, and then we'll be moving on to round 3 and so on and so forth. So pick 38 is with the Demons. They took Matt Jefferson last night, and they've gone for a West Australian from Peel Thunder in Jed Adams, and he's also a key defender, Cal.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? The clubs are clearly loaded up on this part of the draft for key defenders, and they took about 2 seconds to lock that one in, so they're probably riding that one through to this selection, the Demons. So he can mark really well, Jed Adams, 196 centimetres, so again, they've picked for the future in terms of their key position players. They had to have some interest and were really aggressive with their future picks and what they might be able to do to get up the board, but in the end they've stayed where they are, and certainly have that capacity to let these guys learn off a good couple of key defenders in Jake Lever and Stephen May. And
also Harrison Petty, who's played a role for them down there. They've got a fair bit of depth in this area as well, because obviously Adam Tomlinson's still at the football club, who had a really good start to the 2021 season before he did his ACL and struggled a little bit upon return in 2022. So they've got a lot of depth in this area. But as we've spoken about with Melbourne a lot of the time, because they're so well stocked in every area of the field at the moment across all 3 lines, they don't necessarily need players for the now, and we've seen that with the players they've drafted over the last couple of years, where Jacob Van Rooyen, their first round pick last year, probably could have played some senior footy in 2021, but didn't, in the sense that they wanted to be patient with him. Bailey Laurie, who was a first round pick the year before that, is another one that's still waiting for his chance, having dealt with some injury issues in his first season, and then had a really good year of footy in the VFL in 2022 as well. So a couple of players there they've been patient with, and probably Jed Adams is another one they'll be patient with over the next couple of years.
And I think that's probably the end of Melbourne's night as well. So these are 2 picks, and that'll see them done.
Because I think 73 and 78, they're not going to be using those ones. And that is round 2 of the draft done. But we're not done, because there's a couple more rounds still to go. We're predicting about, 59 players to go tonight, according to Cal Toomey, specifically 59. So let's recap what has happened so far on night 2 of the 2022 NAB AFL draft, and it all started with the Giants. They held the first pick of night 2, and as you see there, they took Max Grzuski, who can play at either end of the ground. So another versatile player to follow on from Darcy Jones, who they took, albeit a little bit smaller. Let's look at Darcy Jones.
Let's look at some of the key defenders here. So Max Grzuski is obviously a swingman at both ends of the ground. Lewis Hayes joins the Bombers' key defender. Jacob Ryan is a floating defender, but tall enough to play on some top types there as well. James Van Ness being another one. Before we turn over the slide, though, Cooper Vickery, a big story as well, because he's an interesting one. The Swans, they bid twice on players last night. This time they just went out and took one, and a next generation academy player who was tied to Hawthorn. They had access to him past the pick 40 mark under rules.
And they took him with the pick that Hawthorn had traded them.
Correct. So it's very interesting on that front. Then Fremantle entered the chat. Hugh Davies. Hugh Davies
Added to the WhatsApp group.
Hugh Davies was added as a key defender as well, and then Jed Adams as well into that mix too, and Tom McCullum as well. So clearly there was the defensive street of the draft.
Just on Cooper Vickery, we know that Sydney are obviously rivals with GWS, local rivals. They matched a bit on Harry Rouston, and they matched a bit on Max Michelini, which was the pick that they got Jordan Dawson with. I wonder if the memory stretches as far back as 2020 when Hawthorn made them match the bid on Braden Campbell with the top 5 pick. And I wonder if that's what we're getting back there now. Recruiters have long memories.
They do, but you've got to make these clubs pay for top echelon draft picks, even if they are in the academy. I have no problem with that. In fact, I would have liked to see GWS just go bang Will Ashcroft with the first one and make Brisbane fork out a few more points for that. I like that, but it's an interesting system we have. It makes
you're brutal.
Well, why not?
Me and Kel have a softer spirit.
Oh, well, I know that. You said you'd be an outside player, that's for sure. There's no way I was an outside player in my day. Anyway, let's move on, because the third round is going to start very shortly, and it's the Western Bulldogs who will be on the clock very soon. They've got pick 39 to kick things off in the third round of the draft. And when we take a look at what the Western Bulldogs have already done, they've got a key defender in Jed Buslinger from WA, and then also Charlie Clark, a half forward. So, Riley, what else might the Bulldogs need? I mean, they've got a pretty good list already.
Yeah, they've got a very good list. And they had a really strong trade period we know about with bringing Rory Lobb in to provide key forward support, bringing Liam Jones in to provide key defensive support. They obviously bolstered their list with another key defender last night, Jed Buslinger. So I don't think there's any pressing needs for them now. I still think they can go out and target the best player on their draft board with this first pick of the third round of the draft.
All right, so Cal, we've got the recruiters. I imagine they would be in a room with like a whiteboard, or maybe like, if they're like me, post-it notes coloured, coordinated or something like that. I feel like that could be a thing and a vibe. Who is left on these lists, these whiteboards, these post-it notes?
They might be a little bit more sophisticated than that.
An Excel spreadsheet?
Some Excel spreadsheets and different systems. Each to their own. Some are visual learners, some are,
No, that's true. I'm all about the home edit, if you've ever seen that on Netflix, and colour coordination. So continue.
I'm aware of that one.
It's not on my list.
Look, they have some options who are still there. The other one, they could make the bid here on Alan Davey Jr.
Yes.
Speaking of long memories, is there any... 2 years ago, Josh Dunkley was nearly prized out of the Western Bulldogs by the Bombers.
This would be a good storyline.
That'd be funny. That'd continue the sort of spite night element of
Love it.
of draft. But look, James Gallagher's a player who... not James Gallagher, Harvey Gallagher. James Gallagher's the listener. Harvey Gallagher's a player who I really like around this part of the draft. A small back who can play a number of different positions. Really got his season rolling in the second half of the year. Isaac Keeler's still on the board. I don't think they'd probably look there in terms of their options. Sam Gilby's an athletic player who missed a lot of footy across this season. Noah Long, Caleb Smith's got some real toe, as we spoke about earlier in the show, off the defensive line as well. So, this is going to be interesting which way they go, the Bulldogs.
Do you think there's going to be a trend? We just had the key defenders that dominate round 2. Could there be a trend that emerges in round 3?
There could be.
Oh, we'll just have to wait and How insightful. Thank you. That's why everyone watches AFL.com.au and the AFL Live.
I think this is a tough part of the draft, because there's going to be a lot of players who are trying to squeeze into these last 20 or so selections, and I think there's going to be some players who also miss out, who we really think would have been good enough to feature at that point as well. So that is going to be fascinating, I think, as tonight goes on, and we really hope that... Oh, there we go.
Well, there you go. Harvey Gallagher, not James Gallagher, the Central Bulldogs manager, but Harvey has become a Bulldog. He's off to the kennel at pick 39. And Riley, I think he moved into defence, but seen as a bit of a utility because he can play anywhere.
He's an incredible player in the sense that he moved into the back line this year for the Bendigo Pioneers and actually started kicking goals in bunches while playing off half back. But he's a 19-year-old who missed his draft chance last year. He returned this year. I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago, and he actually said that he thought that when he got overlooked at the mid-season draft that his chance might be over. But he learned to just love his footy again. And when he loved his footy again, he went back and played for his local club. And when he did that, he realised why he played the game. And I think that showed in the second half of the year when he started enjoying his footy. He started getting forward and kicking goals. Couldn't be happier for him in the sense that as we mentioned, he's missed his chance once, but he comes back as an overager this year and does get picked up ultimately. So, yeah, had a great year, averaged 24 disposals for the Bendigo Pioneers, but as I said, kicked 13 goals, 13, so 26 scoring shots from just 10 games for the Pioneers at NAB League level.
All right, well, while the Sydney Swans take their next pick at pick 40, we might check in with Sarah Ollie. We haven't forgotten about you, Sarah. I know you've been waiting patiently at Marvel Stadium, and you have the Giants national recruiting manager in Adrian Caruso with you.
Well, the Giants with the first selection last night and the first team done tonight. Nat, Adrian, 5 selections within the first 34 picks. How stoked are you with that?
Yeah, the plan obviously was, bring 5 players in and looking at our complete haul now that it's sort of finally set, I think we can all sit back and assess, and as a club we're really happy with the 5 players that we've brought in. We feel like there's enough of a different mix to them, all with some positives and in different areas of the ground, which was a priority.
Let's go back to last night and that first selection with Aaron Cadman, a great selection indeed, but were you tempted at all to bid on Will Ashcroft? And if not, just take us into the reasoning behind that.
I suppose it wasn't a temptation. There was a discussion. You know, we had to have that chat because obviously we rate Will really highly. He's a highly credentialed midfielder. He's going to be an A-grade player in the competition. But for us, once we traded up during the trade period to bring Aaron in, you know, we felt that the right thing to do for us, for Aaron, was just call his name out. He was the one we wanted. You know, we didn't want to get caught up in bidding for the sake of bidding. Ultimately, the system's there to pick the player that, you know, where you think they sit. And for us, Aaron was the number 1 pick.
Well, a very worthy number 1 pick. Cal, Riley and Nat, over to you.
Adrian, thanks for coming on for a chat. A lot of discussion around the Harry Ralston bid last night. How did that one play out in the room?
Oh, I think it's been well documented, Cal. Everyone knows what sort of happened. You know, it got to the point where, the Swans said they were going to make a bid. They tried to get us to do some deals to, potentially get in above that bid. And our plan heading in was if the bid came in before any of our picks, we just use the next pick to absorb it and move on and use our next 2 selections that were there. So ultimately, that's how it played out, and it didn't affect our overall strategy, which was to bring in 5 players, of which Harry was always going to be one of them.
Tell us about today then, the offers that came through. I'm sure there was a level of interest in your first pick tonight before you took it and grabbed Max Grzuski. Tell us about the offers that did come through and how much weight you put on potentially moving it out.
Yeah, we had good debate. We spent the day, I suppose, waiting to see which clubs came for the pick. We felt it was always going to be a valuable pick, and if things went differently last night, there was probably going to be maybe more of an appetite to move it. But once we sort of let the dust settle today, we did have a couple of clubs who were showing interest and made strong offers. But once we'd done all the work to, I suppose, make the call that Max was the one that we wanted, we felt if we were to trade into the future or move back, there was just too much uncertainty. We feel like we wanted Max, we identified him, he was the one we wanted. Why put ourselves in that boat of maybe missing out on him and putting the uncertainty on where a future pick might land? We already do have an additional future first round draft pick, and our strategy tonight was, to bring in the 2 best players available at our picks. So ultimately that's what we did.
Tell us a bit about Max and where you see him playing positionally. He's done it at either ends at junior level, but when he gets to the Giants next year, where do you see his magnet being put?
I think initially the plan for us would be to play him ahead of the ball. Some of the stuff we saw at Caulfield Grammar this year, early in the year before he hurt his knee, was really promising. There were a couple of games there where he was flying for balls in the air and competing, bringing it to ground, clunking a few, and we saw some real upside. And I feel like if he didn't get injured, he might have continued on that path. He obviously missed a couple of months in the middle of the year, came back late, was maybe a bit underdone, but we still saw glimpses of what he was capable of as a forward, especially obviously in that Metro game against Country where he took that mark, which we've seen a million times. So we see him playing more ahead of the ball. We feel like that's more of a need for us. But I think the beauty of him, though, is that we know that there is scope for him to be a bit of a swingman. We've seen some of his back stuff at Oakley early in the year that we liked. But, to answer the question, predominantly would be forward.
What about Darcy Jones, Adrian? Because he's more my kind of player. I've absolutely loved watching him go about it, but super versatile as well. Where do you sort of see him fitting into the Giants lineup?
We see Darcy as a small forward. We've obviously lost Bobby Hill, and a few other smalls have left us in recent years. We've got Brent Daniels, we brought in Toby Bedford. we wanted to add in another one in the draft, and we always targeted, we had picks 15 and 18 heading into last night, and we wanted to bring in the player that we rated as the best small forward. And going through that process, we felt Darcy was. He might not be the best small forward right now, given that he's played a lot as a midfielder, but we're projecting forward in how we want to play, and we feel like Darcy, he has the attributes to play the way we want to play, and we're confident that he can really show his wares as a forward. He did it a little bit at league level late in the year for Swan Districts, and we think that based off what we've seen, we can coach him on some of the forward stuff that he needs to learn, but you can't teach him the speed and the agility, the decision making, and all those extra things that are uncoachable.
Adrian, thank you so much for your time. 5 players in the first 34 picks. Congratulations on your draft. Go and pop the feed up for a little bit.
Thank you. We'll be doing that for sure.
Adrian Caruso there, the National Recruiting Manager at the Giants. In that time, we've had a few picks go through, Cal. The Sydney Swans with pick 40 selected Caleb Mitchell, who is a winger from the Murray Bushrangers, and then Fremantle with pick 41 have selected their second player of the draft in Tom Emmett, who is a forward.
Yeah, Caleb Mitchell, really good story as well. Comes out of the Murray Bushrangers program. Medium-sized player, uses the ball really well. Had some interest back end of the draft, so they've got in probably before a couple of other clubs were looking at him, but played some good games also for Big Country as well. And then Tom Emmett is the first, I guess you'd call him mature rager, to come through, 21 years old, and as Nat said, a forward who's played some good footy for Sturt this year.
It's been an area of the ground that they've targeted throughout the trade period as well, Fremantle, in terms of bringing Josh Corbett across from Gold Coast. I think they kind of needed it because they tried to play Griffin Logue there in portions last year, but and obviously he left the club to go to North Melbourne, so they needed a forward. They've got a mature one in Tom Emmett as well, which I really like. And Caleb Mitchell, I reckon Sydney's midfield group and their wing depth is among the best in the competition, so this is just another player to bolster that out.
All right, so Fremantle have picked 41. They took Tom Emmett, as we just mentioned, and they've now taken a ruck in Max Noble, and we know they obviously lost one during the trade period in Lloyd Meek to Hawthorn, so they've replaced him in a way with Max Noble.
Yeah, and as we said before, 207 centimetres and getting bigger. So those players are so hard to find, and he's a really good tap ruckman. He's worked a lot at that craft and under the work and help and guidance of his dad, who's been a bit of a part-time coach down at Gippsland as well. So another Gippy boy gets a chance at the AFL level, and yeah, clearly Fremantle were looking for a young ruckman to bolster their group. I think they'll also scour and look through and see if there's any mature age options potentially in the SSP market as well, given they probably only have Jackson and Sean Darcy as well to lead that group. But yeah, Max Noble follows the lineage of his father in getting to the AFL level, and clearly the Dockers have gone with Hugh Davies, Tom Emmett and Max Noble, so a taller blend.
Certainly have. All right, so the Adelaide Crows are currently on the clock. Now, they actually traded back to get into the draft again because last night they matched a bid for Max McElhaney, who is a key defender that Sydney Swans put the bid on Max during a little bid frenzy by the Swans. So the Adelaide Crows did a trade earlier in the night with the Gold Coast Suns to get back in. So this is where this pick lies, Riley.
I'm interested in that trade in the sense, Cal, that it happened probably, 6 or 7 picks ago. Do you reckon they would have had a player in mind for this selection, or did they just like the pool so much they were confident they'd get a play? Do you think, like, when you're not doing it while the club's on the clock, like what we saw Carlton do, I think Carlton would have jumped in ahead thinking, I can't believe Lockie Cowan's still on the board, we have to get up to this pick to get him. But whereas Adelaide did it 5 or 6, 7, 8 picks ago, do you reckon they just would have liked the talent that was still on the board and they would have been confident of getting a player, or would this have been for a singular player in mind?
And also Gold Coast might have had other takers for that type of deal. So other clubs might have been willing to throw around that type of deal.
So
it's like, well, you have to do it before someone else does it. So there might be a bit of that too in backing yourself in to create an opportunity that other clubs might be chasing as well from a futures market point of view. But they also, I think, would have had their eye on a couple of players at this stage of the draft. We've linked them to some midfielders as well, deeper in the pool during the Phantom draft over the weekend, so maybe they look down that line.
All right, well, the pick is in, so we wait to see what they do. They obviously have a South Australian local in Max Michelini. As we mentioned, his father played over 200 games for Norwood, and they've gone for another local in Billy Dowling, Cal, who is a midfielder from North Adelaide. What can you tell us about Billy?
He was one of the guys we thought might be in the mix for them if they did re-enter the draft or have a pick later on. And yeah, he averaged 31 touches at under 18 level this year, so an absolute ball magnet. Couldn't have done too much more. A bit of a bigger size as well to add to their group, 187 centimetres. I think there were a couple of clubs who were looking at him as a potential pickup in the 50s later on. So that's really fascinating that they've jumped in to grab him. Another local prospect, as we mentioned, 6 minutes and 21 seconds over the 2 kilometre time trial. So big and strong, and it can also run.
Yeah, and I like the fact they're building out for their midfield group. I like some of the bigger, harder ball winners they've gotten there. Rory Laird, Sam Berry's had a really good year. Ben Keys, we know what he's done since he got to the club. And they've got a couple of good young ones coming through. Jake Saligo and Luke Pedler and Braden Cook, obviously ones to watch in the years to come. But I like the fact that they've gone out now and tried to, after bringing in Max Michelini to the football club earlier in the period, having matched a bid in the first round of the draft, gone out and tried to replenish their midfield stocks. And they've got a local boy in Billy Dowling that'll welcome to the club.
All right, it's time now to get back out to Sarah Ollie, who's with Riley Beveridge's sparring partner. It is the Sydney Swans General Manager of Lift Strategy and Recruitment, Ian Kinnear Beatson, is one of our favourites, though, here at afl.com.au. Sarah?
Well, Kinnear might be not the only person that Riley will be sparring with later, and maybe the same can be said for you, Kinnear, because you've been a bit of an agitator so far, but is all fair in love and war when it comes to the trade period and the draft night?
I don't understand this bit about being an agitator. On the back of what?
On the back of forcing the Giants to bid 17, Harry Rouston, Max Michelini, 18, and then you gave away the 18 to the Crows. Talk to us about the decision of yesterday and how you kind of blew up the back end of the draft night one.
Well, point one is we didn't force GWS to do anything. They had 3 options. They can either pass and we take the player, and we don't bid on any player that we wouldn't want to have on our primary list.
So all is fair in love and war?
No, hang on, let me finish. 2, they can match the bid, or 3, and this is why we rang the pick before, they had the option of trading. So, I don't know. And the same with Max Michelini, we really rated him. He's a really good defender, Max, and showed that at senior level, at Sample level. So, yeah, don't know whether it's agitated. That's what the bidding system's there for, to make sure that players go at the right level.
All right, well, let's talk about Cooper Vickery, because he was the first selection for the Swans this evening. Tell us what Swans fans can expect from this kid, because he's a little bit of a bolter.
Again, a bolter in whose eyes? And whose list?
Okay, well, tell us about him then and what the Swans can expect.
This is funny. People say it's a bolter, not in our list. Someone's phantom draft? He's a bolter? Good luck. Look, he's a small defender who played really well on Sheasel a couple of times. Mm-hmm. Left footer from out Orboss way. So his commitment to get to training into Warragul's been significant. The distance that he's got to travel. He's a December date of birth, left footer, and we just think we've been looking for a small defender to try to play on the likes of, the Pickett's and the Charlie Cameron and the Waitmans. They're the ones that get under your skin and they're hard to match up on. We think this kid's got the potential, hopefully, to be able to do that.
Are we still friends?
We're friends.
All right, well, from one sparring partner to another. No, that's
yep.
All right, but Riles, I might throw it to you. Kinnear Beatson's here for you.
Kinnear, thanks for joining us. Caleb Mitchell, what can you tell us about him?
Yeah, we really like Caleb. We had him rated a lot higher. Again, a Yarrawonga boy, first year to the season. His history is really interesting. At the start of the year, he wasn't even on the radar of the Murray Bush Rangers, but he went to his coach, Mark Wiley, at Yarrawonga and said, look, I want to have a fair dinkum crack at this. I want to try to play AFL footy. Got himself super fit, got his 2K time trial down, shed a lot of weight, ended up playing for Victor Country, and we just see him as one of those guys, a bit like an Ed Langdon type, that can just get up and back a fair bit on the wing. And again, they're invaluable, those guys that can compete in the air, but also play that role. And we think that he showed both for the Bush Rangers Vic Country, and then in the grand final in the Ovens and Murray League, that he can play that role.
Kenny, we spoke to you on Sunday night about whether or not the Swans players text you about who they're taking, but I can imagine Tom Papley must be pretty excited about playing next to Jacob Consanti going forward.
Yeah, well, Paps officially wants to come onto our recruiting, or into our recruiting department. He's claiming it, Paps. He's really excited, another Gippsland boy. And, yeah, I think Jacob and Tommy have exchanged quite a few texts over the last 24 hours.
Kinnear, before I let you go, you've had a massive year and a big couple of nights of the draft. You get to put your feet up anytime soon?
And got the rookie. That's almost like one of Riley's questions. Don't you know there's a rookie draft tomorrow?
And I'm actually hosting that
what
too.
What are you
but
people
I
doing there?
Forgotten about it. I don't know, Kinnear. It's been a long year. You know how it is. Enjoy the rest of tonight and the rookie draft tomorrow.
You're still trying to get over the AFLW final, I know.
I am, because last night I called the #1 draft pick and I said he was the #1 AFLW draft pick. So clearly that's what's on my mind. Hey, Kinnear, you're always so good with your time with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Kinnear Beatson there. Whew. Didn't want to ask a question about Cooper Vickery because that would have been too far, but in the time that we were sparring with Kinnear, or Sarah was, Isaac Keeler was taken by St Kilda at pick 44, and the Hawks, I like this from Hawthorn here, because they have put a bid on Alwyn Davey.
So Isaac Keeler to start, he's a key forward and player who can play in the ruck potentially. It has been likened to Paddy Ryder with his capacity and athleticism. He averaged about 18 touches this year, kicked a fair few goals along that time too, so he's able to go up and down the ground and move around the ground. That's part of his skill set. Obviously was a member of the Adelaide Next Generation Academy, but they didn't nominate him, so that's why after pick 40 the Saints were able to just grab him and add him to their group. So that happens there, and then the Hawks finally make a bid on Alwyn Davey. And look, as I said earlier, once it gets past that Essendon pick, I think it was pretty clear that other clubs just had their own priorities and just hadn't really done that much work sometimes on some of these players. They get attached to their own, and sometimes it eventually gets to the stage where, in this case, it was probably getting a little bit ridiculous that he was still there. So they make the bid there, Essendon match, and we'll be very happy that they get Alwyn Davey Jr. to add to their mix. And I wonder what jumper number he'll have at the Bombers. I think 33 is free, and I think he's a big Cyril Rioli fan from back in the day, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see him in 33.
That's a great number, 33. But he certainly is an exciting player, isn't he, Cal? Because we've seen that he can go forward, but he's done some of his best work in the midfield. Yeah,
that's right. He's skillful, he's crafty. Actually, because of his dad's footy, as a real crummer and speedy, lightning quick player at ground level inside the forward 30 almost. It's maybe a view that he's going to be similar to him. I think his brother is more similar to his dad, and I think Alwyn is more similar to the way Aaron played all his footy at Melbourne across his time, obviously. So the family history continues, and later we'll see Jaden Davey join as well, and they'll be the first ever father-son twins.
Well, you mentioned it before, Cal, but I actually really like his midfield traits. And we were at that game, at the Vic Metro game at Icon Park against Western Australia, and he went up the ground, pushed further up the ground. I like what he can produce in the midfield, and I think it'll take some time for him to get there at an AFL level to play midfield. I think he'll start his career as a small forward, but I really like what he's been able to do when he's gone into the on-ball group.
We played some VFL footy too, I think, for Essendon as well late in the year. So he's had some senior footy experience, which is good news for Bombers fans. So Alwyn Davey, officially a Bomber. Great news. That means Hawthorn is on the clock again. So pick 46. They've got 3 minutes left as we recap what Hawthorn has already done in the draft. Cam McKenzie, of course, the French-speaking midfielder. I wonder how long that's going to get old. Probably past tonight. It'll be old with poor Cam McKenzie. Josh Weddle, they took at 18, and I saw a little video on social of the two of them walking through the Hawthorn facility this morning with Sam Mitchell, who looked like he was eating his breakfast. So they've already become acquainted with their teammates. And pick 37, they took Henry Hustwaite, so a 194 centimetre midfielder as well. And as we spoke about, Riley, they just don't have those tall, bigger-bodied midfielders at the moment. And after the trade period and Tom Mitchell and Jaeger O'Meara going out of the side, it leaves James Warple pretty much as the most experienced member of that midfield.
Yeah, I like what they've been able to do with their midfield group in the last couple of years with Josh Ward and John Newcombe and Connor McDonald last year as well, who played some footy, and he'll go into the midfield in due time. But the fact that they've managed to get two really bigger-bodied players in Cam McKenzie and then Henry Hustwaite as midfield options this year, and complement those two with Josh Weddle, who, as you said, Sam Mitchell can see him potentially playing midfield, but he's played a lot of his junior career as an intercepting defender. So be interested to see what type of player they add to their mix here at pick 46.
All right, well, the pick is in as we wait to see what they might do here. The Hawks with their 4th pick in this year's draft, obviously trading in to get Weddle as well. We should remember that. But missed out on Cooper Vickery, who was taken by the Swans. Jack O'Sullivan from the Oakley Chargers, is that right, Cal?
That's right. He didn't play heaps of footy this year. Unfortunately, missed a bit of time with an injury, but yeah, has some craft inside the forward 50 and through the midfield as well. 177 centimetres, back to full fitness now, so we'll hit the ground running. But that shoulder injury ruled him out of a fair chunk of the year. Riley, and you spoke to him recently. A smile just went on your face because you're quite fond of him.
Yeah, I am. He's just a ripping kid. And when I spoke to him, obviously he missed a lot of the year with injuries, you mentioned, Cal, but he thinks he can be among the best players in this year's draft crop. Wow. He's got that confidence in his own ability, and you can sort of sense it with the highlight clips that we saw there. And I'm wrapped for him because I think he's put in all of the work he possibly could without being able to show the amount that he would have liked. So the fact that he found himself on an AFL list and that the club's backed his talent, I think he's the type of player and the type of personality that will be able to sort of demonstrate that once he gets to an AFL club and gets a clean bill of health.
Do you see him playing in the midfield or more, I mean, obviously start more forward?
Yeah, I think he would probably prefer to play in the midfield. I think that's where he's probably played his best junior footy in time. But obviously, as we've seen from a number of players, and we saw it this year even at Hawthorn, players don't necessarily start their careers where they want to start them. They then move into their preferred positions as time goes on.
All right, so Jack Sullivan joins the Hawks. It means that Carlton is on the clock with pick 47. They've already had 3 selections tonight. They've taken Oliver Hollins and Lockie Cowan, 2 lifelong Blues fans, with their first 2 picks. They then took Jackson Binns, which Riley was red hot on. That was with pick 32. What do they look to do here, Riley, do you think?
Is there a chance that Harry Lemmy could come into things here?
Yeah.
Or at all?
I think a key position player is something that they've needed depth. It's an area where they've needed depth for quite a long time, and Harry Lemmy's an interesting one if they go that way in the sense that...
Or Ruckman, actually. Hudson O'Keefe could be a chance as well.
Yeah. But either of those options is because they've needed tall depth for a long period of time. We saw them at stages throughout last year where they really lacked options behind the ball when a few players got injured, and then forward of the ball as well. And Charlie Curnow made such a great return this year, but he's had an unreliable body throughout his career, and Harry Mackay's another one in that bracket as well. So I think they'll try and get an option either forward behind the ball in a key position slot or potentially as a ruck as well.
Yeah, and Hudson O'Keefe's been a player who has had some interest from them as well. They've looked at a couple of other rucks too. We know Max Noble was taken just shortly ago from Fremantle's perspective as well. So this is where we're entering the last 12, 13, 14 picks. A lot of names still need to be crammed into that group, and there are still some really good players left on the board. Joe Richards is still available. Jed Hagan, Sam Gilby, Mitch Subowski, Caleb Smith. We know Cooper Harvey will get to. North Melbourne. Luke Teal's another prospect as well. So yeah, that's some options for them there.
And you mentioned Harry Lemmy, a really interesting story as well. But like on Christmas Day, he was doing 100 hundreds with Riley Filthorpe from the Adelaide Crows. So there's already a bit of a relationship there. But imagine, I know the Brayshaw brothers do it, but can you imagine Christmas Day just doing 100 hundreds? And there we go. Harry Lemmy has been taken by the Blues. Just tell us a little bit more about him. He was an excellent junior cricketer as well.
Yeah, very good talent in that sport, but has chosen footy. And to be honest, at the start of this year, if he'd said that Harry Lemmy would be pick 47, you would have said, well, what happened? And because he's entered the year as a number 1 pick contender, just couldn't get going this year ahead of the ball, playing for South Australia and also West Adelaide. Last year, did some really good things in reserves level as a bottom ager. So that's some things that have carried on through. But he's probably been picked as a key back.
Yeah.
Because the performances of the latter stages of this year were much better playing in that role. And at his height, 199 centimetres, he's pretty athletic, can mark it. I think he's definitely worth a go here.
Yeah, he's a key defender as well, ace of spades. But Jacob Wiedering and Lewis Young were really their only key defensive options this year. They obviously brought Sam Durden in through the mid-season draft as well, so he provides another body for them. So if they are using him as a key defender, you can see why, in the sense that Lewis Young, for periods last year when Jacob Wiedering went out of the side for an extended period, was almost their only key defender left. So they've needed an option in that part of the ground for quite some time, and they'll hope that Harry Lemmy can provide that.
And fun fact about Harry Lemmy, finished school last year but has been working as a medical courier. So now he's a full-time footballer at the Carlton Football Club as we wait for Collingwood to make their selection here. Pick 48 for the Pies. Ed Allen, Jacob Ryan have been selected. They then traded pick 30 out to the Blues, and they've decided to take Joe Richards from Wangaratta.
Well, I don't think they were set on
sort of kids into your club. Local kid, really keen to get started and got a great attitude and thirst for the work, so we're looking forward to it.
James, congratulations on what you've achieved at the draft. Looks like you've got 4 good players in there. Thanks so much for joining us on AFL NAB Draft Night Live.
My pleasure.
I made an absolute meal of that one, didn't I? NAB AFL Draft Night Live.
You got the words right, you didn't get the order right.
Oh, God, it has been a long few days, that is for sure. Hey, we should mention there has been a trade that has gone down. That's right. So the Giants have traded pick 51 to Hawthorn for a future 4th round selection.
And before that, Adelaide traded with Brisbane to get back into the draft where they grabbed Hugh Bond. Geez, they like their big midfielders, don't they?
So Hugh Bond, I believe a national rower, but has only focused on footy in the last couple of years, Cal.
Yeah, and he's tough. He's a tough player. He's someone who's competitive and those instincts come through in the way he plays, and that's been the case for his time at Big Country and the Greater Western Victoria Rebels across the past couple of years. So, yeah, a talent and certainly fits that mould of a tough player who's going to go in and win his own footy.
And the Hawks, with that traded pick, with pick 51, have taken Bailey McDonald, who is a defender from the Oakley Chargers.
There you go. Well, he was an option for a few clubs around this point of the draft. He's one who's come on in leaps and bounds late in the year, playing some school footy, a teammate of Elijah Sardis and Matt Jefferson and Kobe Bergiel as well at Wesley College. So certainly has some great awareness when he's got the footy in his hands. He uses the ball pretty well and gets going for his side. So someone who's, I'm scared to use bolter, but someone who's charged up the ranks late in the year.
Let's be honest, we're never going to stop using the terms bolter and slider. Sorry, Kinnear, that's just what we love, a bolter. Who doesn't love a draft bolter?
Kinnear.
That is correct. All right, so the Geelong Cats are on the clock now. They've got 4 minutes left. Pick 52 for them as we take a look at what they have done, and we have to go all the way back to quite early on in last night's draft. Of course, Jai Clark, the Geelong Falcons midfielder, he was selected, and he'd been linked to them a long way out as soon as they got hold of that pick 7, which, Riley, is quite remarkable, isn't it? Because they won the flag and then they get pick 7 as part of that Jack Bowes deal.
Yeah, done pretty well.
There's some options here for Geelong. They've obviously had this late pick out the back for a long time, so they've been scouting this area of the draft for a while, knowing that they weren't going to be able to move. They didn't have many assets to be able to move that around. So they've spent some time. They did spend some time on Joe Richards. They nearly got to their pick, so I think that would have been an option for them. Ruckman Cam Owen has got some interest as well. Do they go for another ruck though? Do they go for a tall forward? Phoenix Foster and Jovan Petrick are options potentially. So they look at Mitch Skabowski as an inside midfielder and ball getter. That could be a couple of players around the mark at this point, knowing as well that Oscar Riccardi, if they don't attract a bid for him, will come through as a rookie-listed father-son pick, as will Ted Clohessy, a midfielder from the Geelong Falcons as well, through the Next Generation Academy system. So those two already budgeted for, I guess you'd say, as rookie selections, should they not get bids in the next number of selections that are coming through.
Okay, have we had a few clubs pass yet? I'm not sure.
Not yet.
Not
So
that we
the
have,
clubs
so-
that we expected to were Brisbane and GWS
Yeah.
with 50 and 51, but they opted to trade
Yep, that's
those
right.
picks. So they're trading into
good
the future.
business.
It is very good business because they weren't using them anyway. So the fact they managed to get, even if it is a really late pick in 2023, the fact that they managed to get something as opposed to nothing is a win for those clubs. A small one, given the context of what we've seen over the last 48 hours, but a win nonetheless.
So just to note, Cal, that you said 59 picks tonight.
I know.
We're at
Getting
52.
close.
It's getting very close. Do you want to change your mind at all?
We might nudge
No.
into the 60s, that's okay.
That's all right. We won't hold it against you, not like the rest of your phantom draft, but we'll see. No. Geelong, 1 minute and 47 seconds left. And then Port Adelaide. Obviously, they've only had the one selection in the draft so far. That came all the way back at pick 36, where they took Tom McCullum, who's a key defender, and they've the Power fans have had to wait a fairly long time for them to get in. And I wonder what they'll do with pick 53 as well. And then you've got the Bombers 54 and the Tigers again at 55, Riley.
If that's the last pick Essendon have, will they just take Jaden Davey with that pick?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, that's what they do. I expect him to be a national draft father-son.
Yep.
Can be a rookie as well, but I expect him to be a national draft father-son.
Which is what North Melbourne, of course, will do with Cooper Harvey later on the night as well when their next pick rolls around.
Yep,
When's
correct.
that? Probably about 70 or...
56.
Oh, 56.
56.
Okay, there we go. Yep.
The next one beyond Richmond there, Nat.
Oh, hey, I can't see. It's not on our graphic.
I wonder if Geelong thinks to themselves, and I know you're reaching the latter parts of the draft, but whether or not they think to themselves they might need a bit more key position depth, particularly forward of the ball as well. I mean, Tom Hawkins is 35 next year, Jeremy Cameron's 30 next year. Ollie Henry does arrive to provide another goal-kicking option for them, but whether or not they start thinking, right, do we need the next key position player in the forward line for us, and can we grab one late here? It's worth a fly because, as we've spoken about numerous times over the last couple of years, really, that you can find players that are key position players that are late developers in this part of the draft. Nick Larkey was one of them, Mitch Lewis was one of them. They were taken with picks beyond 60 and they've turned into really good players at North Melbourne and Hawthorn respectively.
All right, we shall see. The pick is in for Geelong at 52. As I mentioned, Jai Clark. We have to go all the way back to pick 8 last night for their first selection of the 2022 NAB AFL draft. This is their second pick. Cats fans have had to wait a pretty long time and they've taken a ruck. Is it a ruck? Yeah, Phoenix.
A ruck
yeah,
forward.
Ruck forward, yep. And probably a bit of a surprise packet in the chance for South Australia.
Yeah, and he can grab it, he can mark it, he can jump and take a shot. So he's a player who will be given time as a bit of a project, I guess, in that he's athletic, and we see a couple of his grabs here playing against Vic Country and the Allies as well. So goes up for his hangers, and certainly is a prospect who will be developing in a really good system now alongside some good key position players.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see his development because, talent-wise, there's a fair bit to work with there. And key forwards don't grow on trees, as they always say, 197 centimetres. So there's I think, some capacity to maximise more of that ability.
I agree. And as I just mentioned then, with Tom Hawkins and Jeremy Cameron, they'll be both the wrong side of 30 next year. I think this is about the time of the draft where they start to probably need to think about looking to see whether or not they can get another one of those types of players in and take a flyer, take a punt with one of them.
What are you thinking here?
Yeah, well, this is going to be likely their last pick, Port Adelaide. They probably have a couple of options, I would say. Tom Scully would be right in their mix as a key forward, 200-centimetre player who's kicked a lot of goals at Sanford under-18 level as well. I think Jed Hagen's another one who should be right in contention as well. So I think those two, Jed Hagen, very, very different player to Tom Scully. He's nearly about 30 centimetres shorter than him, 175-centimetre player, but a worker, a leader, plays through midfield, defence, can be a really dedicated and disciplined small lockdown player. So weighing up oranges against apples in this circumstance, but that's what it gets to at this point of the draft.
Trees, oranges, apples. I don't know where you're going, but one thing I do know is Carlton has taken 4 selections in the draft so far, and their head of list management is Nick Austin, and he's standing by with Sarah Ollie.
Nick, we spoke to Ollie Hollins yesterday. He was so excited to become a blue bagger because he's grown up supporting Carlton. But this is more than just a boyhood dream realised for Ollie, isn't it? Because he adds that dash and run that you guys need. Yeah,
absolutely. It's a great story. Like to have family play for the club and play in grand finals, and it just meant so much to him. And for us, to have him at that pick, we feel like it addressed a desperate need for us, but also someone that we weren't compromising on the talent, we weren't reaching, so it was a really good fit.
And what about tonight? You were keen to get up to selection 30 to get Lockie Cowan. What have you seen in this defender from Tasmania, and why did you want to get up there and get him?
Yeah, look, we had Lockie rated really high. We love his competitiveness. He's a great athlete. He provides that dash and that running carry, and he's got an aerial threat, but he's also a beautiful long kick. So we love the way he plays. We love his attitude. He's a leader and he's aggressive. So it's a really good fit for us too.
All right, over to you, Cal, Nat and Riley.
Nick, you brought in 2 more runners into the football club, obviously with Ollie Hollins and then Jackson Binns later on the draft. How much of a point of emphasis was that throughout this player movement period?
Yeah, look, it was. A clear focus. We wanted to increase our running capacity as a group, and we feel like Blake Acres adds that too through the trade period. So to add 3 guys that can cover the ground and play different roles in and around the square, we're really comfortable with the mix.
Nick, what about Harry Lemmy? What are you picking him as? A key back, key forward, a mix? What are you sort of identifying as his starting position when he enters the footy club later this week?
Yeah, good question, Kel. I think front half for a start, but we loved his ability to move back later in the year. He looked a natural in defence. He marked the ball, but first and foremost, we think Harry to develop his front half game and to have a tool under Harry and Charlie to come in and develop and learn his craft. It's really exciting to complement the 3 runners that we've brought in. We're really comfortable with the mix.
Nick, you've got a really lovely mix there. Congratulations on what you've achieved at the draft, and we can't wait to see how it all unfolds for you in 2023 and beyond.
Visual. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Nick Austin there with Sarah Ollie at Marvel Stadium. And in that time, Port Adelaide with pick number 53 in this year's draft took Tom Scully. He's a soccer convert. Still pretty raw, Cal, as a key forward. But we spoke about him a lot early days in Road to the Draft podcast.
Yeah.
And then he dropped off a little bit.
Familiar name in some ways, isn't it?
Yeah.
Number 1 pick from 12, 13 years ago, Tom Scully, Melbourne.
Testing yourself there.
Yeah, I think it was 2009.
Yeah.
Anyway, Tom Scully, very different player to him. 202 centimetres, takes a lot of marks, kicks a lot of goals, kicked 50 goals this year at Sandful, under 18 level, playing for West Adelaide. So I think that's a project that Port Adelaide was definitely worth taking on. There's talent there. He can grab it. He converts his opportunities. Didn't have an influence, for South Australia in the championships. Was overlooked at games there, which probably pushed back his draft spot. But I think certainly at the back end of the draft, these type of guys are absolutely worth a shot. And we've seen his ability to hit the scoreboard. So another good pick from Port Adelaide there, I think.
All right, so Essendon, pick 54 is in, and this is what we expect is that Jaden Davey will be taken here as a father-son, and that is correct. So the twin of Alwyn Davey Jr. joins his brother at the Bombers, and that's just really lovely. The first ever father-son twins.
Yeah, you don't see too many twins come through the draft.
Love it.
There's been a couple over the last 10 years. We saw the Mackays, obviously, and the College Jasneys.
Still no evidence they're separate people.
And the College Jasneys in 2013 as well, Cade and Jake. So Jaden and Alwyn joined the Bombers and they boost their small forward ranks. We had Brad Scott on the draft night countdown show a couple of days ago, Riley, and it was about Anthony McDonald, Tip and Woody is coming back as well. Obviously, he's re-signed for the club next year. He'll be back and hopefully getting back to that sort of conditioning to be ready to have an impact. He hasn't played in a long time, so the expectations are that it'll take some time to build there. But him working with and alongside the Davey boys is going to be pretty exciting. They spent a lot of time at the club when they were about this.
There's so much vision in them when they're tiny.
I actually remember them running around in the rooms.
That's how old you are.
While I've been doing this. I remember them running around the rooms as little kids
Yes.
During James Hurd's coaching stint there when Alwyn got to that 100th game, and what an important moment it was that James Hurd got him to that 100th game when it was at the end of his career. He played 100 games to make sure that his boys would be eligible for the footy club down the track, and here they are now.
No, it's fantastic. And Jaden has spent a lot of time coaching Alwyn Jr. from the boundary line. I think there might have been some friction when we spoke to him. He likes to give some very firm and direct feedback at times to his brother. But hey, they're helping each other along on this journey, and it's absolutely fabulous to see them at the Bombers at the moment. So Richmond are on the clock. There can't be too too many picks left in the 2022 NAB AFL draft. Pick 55 for the Tigers, and as we mentioned, they've only had the one other pick, and that was at 49, and they took Caleb Smith, who's sort of a very quick half-back or maybe even a winger type.
Yeah, that's right. So I don't think that was necessarily a pick on needs. That was just a guy who's shown a bit in the second half of the season to say, well, let's give him a go in our system. And you can never have too much pace. Pace never goes out of fashion at AFL level. So if you've got that in a capacity to break the lines from half back, then Smith certainly took the eye on that front. And look, it only needs sometimes a pretty small sample size. The slices, the thin slices, sometimes you get a bigger slice, but for the case of Caleb Smith for the Tigers last week, it was a relatively small amount of games that has gotten him drafted. So it's amazing sometimes you can time your run really well.
On slices, as if you would ever choose a thinner, slimmer slice.
I mean, that's a good point.
I've never seen you do that.
That is a good point. I like my vanilla slices.
Oh, you do.
Yeah,
you
love
do.
my vanilla slices.
You also love a free feed. You've gone to a lot of games this year, like NAB League games and all the rest.
Yeah.
Has there been one club or even a draftee's house that you've been to that put on a really great spread?
It's a good question. The schools do a good job. The schools do a good job. I'm always very lucky when there's a Saturday afternoon game. And
you can do a phantom form guy with your free feeds, Cal.
Yes, that's a great idea.
Maybe next year.
It's got NAB AFL Draft Night countdown written all over it.
It does actually. Happy to sample.
Well, you guys are going to have to step it up for next year's show because you played Uno, you've had Connect 4, your song was an absolute banger, and She's Will Be Loved, and we are going to replay that for everyone at the end of the draft.
A few of the names who are still on the board here.
Sam
Gilby, Jed Hagen, who I think would have been in Powers mix recently as well for that last pick, would have to be in consideration. Mitch Skabowski had a really good season. He's unlucky. This is sort of the club's sort of looking at inside midfielders, how many go, how many can you have on your list. I still think he'll be on an AFL list somewhere next year, and that might be via the rookie draft tomorrow. I still think he'll get an opportunity though, and he should, because his performances are really good. Jaden Magor has been a talent across this year who we've mentioned a few times. Luke Teal, another one who I think, if not tonight, could be a rookie shot tomorrow. And the Tigers have had a look at him too. Trained at the footy club earlier this year as part of the NAB AFL Academy. He's the son of Robert Teal, who played some games for the Swans previously, back in the 90s, I think it was. So a few options there, and also some taller types too. So there are some capacity here to maybe pick a diamond in the rough, and we'll see what happens.
All right, the Tigers pick is in. So wait to see what they have come up with here. As I mentioned, Caleb Smith joining the Tigers at pick 49, so this is their other tick, and they've gone with Steely Green, who is an inside midfielder from South Fremantle, Cal.
Yeah, he is.
Name.
It's a great name. It's a great name. It's a great story as well. Steely Green, he's a prospect. He actually was struck by lightning when he was out yachting, and he's managed to survive that and come back, and now he's on an AFL list, and with the best name in the draft, you'd have to say Steely Green. And did some really good things for Western Australia at times this year. Averaged 19 disposals as well at senior level for South Fremantle as well. So played some senior footy and got that taste of it, and was a star at the Combine, where he was in the top 5 for the agility, and also the 2 kilometre time trial was under 6 minutes and 20 seconds. So that shows his mix. And look, he's going to be given some time there as well. There's no rush, I think, with a later pick coming through. But a smaller midfield type who definitely has a go. And we know that the Tigers aren't afraid of picking West Australians who have a go. Liam Baker was drafted pretty late in the piece too.
And he's turned into a pretty good inside midfielder himself, and Steely joins that midfield mix. And it's an area that bolstered throughout the trade period as well. Obviously, we know about Jacob Hopper and Tim Taranto coming to the club, and I think they've done that really well. I mean, Jack Ross went in there late in the year and had played some really good footy as well. We saw what Tyler Sonsie did when he went through the midfield late in the year. So they're starting to develop these players that have been later picks in the draft. They're starting to develop them and have them be good footballers, as you mentioned, Cal, with Liam Baker as well. So, I mean, Tiger fans out there will look at someone like a Steely Green and think, can he be the next one that we develop into a really good A-grade level midfielder at the football club? And he'll have time to develop, and it's a good environment to develop in with Damien Hardwick there, obviously a triple premiership coach at the Tigers.
So North Melbourne on the clock now, pick 56. Is this where we think Cooper Harvey will be taken?
Yeah, this will be where Cooper Harvey's taken, and he obviously joins them as their last national draft pick. And if he can be half as good a player as his old man, he's going to play about 200 games. So he's got some ability, and we haven't seen too much of him this year. He's had some arm injuries at different stages that held him back, but his form at the end of the season.
What's he like in comparison to his dad in terms of playing type?
Well, he's a bit taller. He's 180 centimetres, so a little bit taller there, and plays midfield forward.
Okay.
Got some power, got some explosiveness, and played a big role in this game as well for Vic Metro late in the piece. Some good performances in the past or last month of the season for the Northern Knights in the NAB League as well. So, yeah, there's a little bit about him.
And his dad's a chance to get rookie tomorrow, apparently, according to Brady Rawlings. He's still asking the question, can I get back onto the rookie list? And Brady actually said to us on Draft Night Countdown, I think he was being serious as well. So
nothing would surprise. Boomer's still in pretty good nick himself. So
he's bulked up as well.
It's going to be interesting, that father-son dynamic at the club. And Boomer's still involved at the Roos and obviously been a part of that club for so long.
You've got to step back. You don't want to be one of those, you know, sports dads or tiger mums.
And the father-son romance of it all is fantastic, isn't it?
Brilliant.
Because last year the Roos took Jackson Archer with their last pick in the national draft. He obviously played a couple games this season and already seems a more bulked up version of himself heading into this pre-season. And then we see Cooper Harvey coming through now. And Brady Rawlings, the list manager of the Roos, played with both of those guys' dads. So
crazy to think,
keeping the family there.
It is. If only they just changed the father-son eligibility to maybe 50 games instead of 100, then Hawthorn might have had Noah Anderson on their list. I'm still not over that. But we should get out to Sarah Ollie because she's at Marvel Stadium. She's got Melbourne's national recruiting manager in Jason Taylor with her.
Well, firstly, Jason and I are just going to settle an old score. So, Jason? No, this time I'm pulling away from the handshake. But let's get down to business because Matthew Jefferson with pick 15, just how do you envisage him teaming up with the likes of Jacob Van Rooyen in the future? Because they're two really prized picks and two great forwards moving forward for the D's.
Yeah, I think they complement each other. They're very different. You know, Matty's he's a little bit more, I suppose, mobile, get up the ground at good speed. Not that Jacob doesn't have all those facets as well, but he's a good contested mark. You know, he's good on the lead, and he's a goal scorer. He scores goals in every game he plays. He doesn't need many opportunities to score goals, and we think that they're just slightly different in their styles, and they should complement each other.
Now, we heard that you were trying to trade up the draft order to perhaps get the likes of Bailey Humphrey. Just take us into the decision-making around that and how close that perhaps you were to getting that pick.
Yeah, I don't think we're that close in the end, really. I think that's been what's transpired over the draft is that, you know, there's some really quality players that can change the fortunes of your football club at the top of the order of drafts, and that's apparent in this draft, and I think clubs were trying to get up for that very reason, and for the same very reason everyone held their picks. So, yeah, not much happened. But, yeah, we had a go at it. You know, we weren't going to try and be silly about it, but you've got to give something to get something. So.
All right, well, Cal, Nat and Riley have a few more questions for Jason.
Jace, tell us about Jed Adams, your second and final pick in the 30s, a player at the other end of the ground to Matt Jefferson as a key defender.
Yeah, look, Cal, we wanted to bring in some taller players through this draft if we could and address that if we thought there was a quality of them there. And, you know, we really like what we saw with Jed. He's missed some footy over the last couple of years, but he was able to come back in. He played a senior game for Peel early in the year, and then obviously with their Colts, and made it into the state academy team and played the last two national games. And we really like what he did there. He's got a strong aerial game, and we were really impressed with his senior game for Peel in the second half of the year. I thought he looked right at home there, and that gave us a lot of confidence. He played as a key forward as a youngster growing up, but clearly we've predominantly seen him as a key back this year. So, we just wanted to address that tall. I wasn't looking at the camera then, Cal. Sorry.
Oh, sounds good. You've done well, and you can go have a rest now. Any rookie selections tomorrow?
Yeah, we'll assess that, what's left on the order, and then, yeah, we'll go from there, mate, but we're likely to have one for sure.
Jason, thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you.
Jason Taylor there with Sarah Ollie. Now, in the meantime, we've had a few passes, but we've also had Fremantle with pick 57 select Corey Wagner from Port Melbourne's VFL side, but an XD en route.
Yeah, and Riley, you reported this a couple of weeks ago that the Fremantle were interested in him, so he gets a third chance at it.
Well, it's a pretty remarkable story because he was a mature age pickup with North Melbourne when he was first drafted as a 19-year-old. So he goes to the club as a 19-year-old, having missed his draft chance the year before. He then gets delisted, plays VFL football with Werribee and then Casey, and then gets his way back onto an AFL list with Melbourne, having been a pre-season supplemental selection period there with Casey. Plays a couple of years at Melbourne, gets delisted, then goes to another VFL club in Port Melbourne, and finally gets a third chance as well at Fremantle. So he's gone to half-back. He's a great user of the ball, and that's what Fremantle obviously identified with him there.
All right, so the clubs are passing left, right and centre here, but Fremantle are now on the clock at pick 58. And Cal, this is getting down to the wire because you said there would be 59 picks tonight.
Well, we're going to be pretty close.
You will be very close indeed. Well, Freo have passed.
You might not get there. There's not too many more picks to come, and a talking point out of this from an Essendon perspective as well will be around Anthony Munkara.
Yes.
And there's been a lot of suggestion around what that looks like for him, and we did think in the lead up that it was most likely he got through the national draft and was available to them as a Category B rookie. He's really exciting talent, hasn't played a lot of footy this year, so will be brought through the system and given time to develop and get ready to play as a prospect potentially. But I think Category B rookie is where he is most likely to now end up. And there's been a number of players on that front as well. I think West Coast will get a couple of options there as well in Jordan Baker and Tyrell Drewer. Through the Category B options. I expect Will Edwards as well at Sydney as an academy player to go through as a rookie selection there. A couple of players at Fremantle under NGA rules likely with Josh Draper and Conrad Williams. So all these guys under the NGA rules, if they're not bid on under the national draft system, then the clubs if they're tied to do get the option to grab them as a rookie, a Category B rookie, and bring them on basically automatically that way. Shadow Brain might be an option as well for Brisbane. He's not a member of their... the Lions didn't have access to nominate him as a national draft academy player because he didn't spend enough time in the state leading up to the draft, but they do, under state-based rules, have access to him as a potential rookie, so that could be a possibility as well.
And he'll give Steely Green a run for his money for best name in the draft pool for sure. So West Coast have... I'm not sure that they've passed here. We've had quite a few clubs passing. So pick 58 and the Eagles have already done a fair bit of work, as we know. Ruben Jinby, Elijah Hewitt, Harry Barnett in a ruck, and Kobe Bergiel, who's a midfield or a forward, but very, very quick. So that's what their draft hand looks like at the moment. And they've now taken Noah Long as well, a forward, Cal.
Yeah, smaller forward, small player who's played at Bendigo this year. They did have some interest a little bit further up the board, but I think a couple of clubs who had some interest in him probably tapped out with their picks. So, can go inside and get the footy, 180 odd centimetres, and certainly has that endurance to go pretty well at a higher level. So it was impressive at stages this season for Vic Country and got good exposure in that forward mix, playing alongside Aaron Cadman and at his feet there. So a pretty solid play there for the Eagles at this pick, I think.
All right.
5 picks across the course of the 2 nights for West Coast. I think they've done pretty well. Just while we're on the Eagles, Cal, because I know there's a lot of debate with pick 14 around whether or not it'll be Elijah Hewitt or Ed Allen at that pick. Do you think they looked at it from a sense of getting Ruben Jinby at 9, a bigger-bodied midfielder, and thinking to themselves, Ed Allen's in a similar mix, can play a similar role. Do we need someone that's maybe a different profile of midfielder, which is where they got Elijah Hewitt? Or do you think that would have played into their considerations at all?
Yeah, I think also just the fact that it's talent first at that part of the draft. And the other part of it with Elijah Hewitt is there was definitely considerations from a number of clubs that he might get taken inside the teens and a club might come back in. So it was going to be risky to try and get him through and play the tactical game and get him through to that third pick where they took Harry Barnett to that. So that's probably an element of where you need to know what's happening and what's out there, because Ed Allen, clearly they rated behind Elijah Hewitt, and Elijah Hewitt's certainly got that power and explosive streak to be a real eye catcher within that top group. So I think we'll see a fair bit of Jimby and Hewitt next year together.
Do you think Port Adelaide picks here?
I would say it's unlikely.
You're just hoping that you get the 59. Right, aren't you?
Well, we need one more for that, but I would say that's unlikely. But they've got Nathan Barklow, who's another one of these players who's a potential NGA prospect. They've committed to him as a rookie as well, a Category B rookie, should he get through tonight, which is obviously going to be that way. So he's a prospect out of their academy system, and I think it's good for the NGA prospects to are on the fringes to get that opportunity, and clubs are happy to sort of store them on that list and see how they go.
So Port Adelaide have got 2 key position players in the draft so far. Their first pick for the entire draft came at 36, so they had to wait a fair while. They got Tom McCullum, who's from Tasmania, a key defender. Then they decided to select Tom Scully, not the Tom Scully, the number 1 draft pick from a few years ago, the midfielder, but a key forward at pick 53, and Tom Scully was a soccer convert as well. So Riley, they've done pretty well here, and it'll be interesting to see, you know, what they do, because Ken Hinkley, we know he's in the last year of his contract as well. So a lot of pressure on Port Adelaide as they take Kyle Marshall, another key position player. So it's quite interesting what they're doing here.
Yeah, 200 centimetres as a tall defender. So you're hitting high notes at that point, aren't you? And you know, him and Tom Scully can go and train together on each other and probably work well together alongside each other. So, yeah, prospect who can jump, has played some good footy this year for South Adelaide.
All right, so that is Port Adelaide, probably
St Kilda will be
done now, so St Kilda might be out. So this could be it, Cal.
Just on Port Adelaide as well, I think we've mentioned it before, but...
Pick is in?
Oh, the pick is in? No, that's passed.
No, okay.
Just on Port Adelaide, as we mentioned before, they came into this draft probably with a bit of a gap, not a glaring gap, but a little bit of a gap in terms of key position talent. And particularly behind the ball. We mentioned before that they had like Tom Jonas and Tom Cleary and Lear and Trent McKenzie really as being their only 4 options behind there. So the fact they've managed to bring in 2 key defenders in this draft period, it just bolsters them a little bit going forward.
I also think that looking forward, I'm really excited about what Port Adelaide do next year. Jason Horne-Francis, I think everyone knows my thoughts about Zach Butters and where he's going with his footy. Connor Rosie, I feel like, is going to be full-time midfielder almost after what we saw in the back half of this season.
And the fact that Junior Rioli probably allows him to play more midfield time as well.
I think Orazio Fantasia's hit the track pretty well as well.
Get his body right.
Yeah, and just had an interrupted year last year with a lot of things across pre-season heading into the year. He's a pretty crucial player for them as well to get going. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to be excited about with what Port Adelaide have put together, and it's been a really strong off-season for them.
All right, the Tigers have passed as well. So, Cal, it looks like you could be on the money here with just 59 picks tonight. It's a tense time as Brisbane decide what they're going to do. Surely they're just passing here.
They'll be out, I think.
I'd say so.
You'd imagine so. And Melbourne we know because they've packed up and left their recruiting room.
Yeah, they have. Well, so Brisbane and Hawthorn and the Gold Coast Suns have quite a few picks at the back end here, but you sort of think they might all pass. I mean, Hawthorn have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players, and then they always like Riley to leave some room for the mid-season draft just because they've done so well.
Yes, they have.
In the
past. Of course, John Newcomb, one of their best players now, came via that avenue. They've got a couple of ruckmen in as well last year, so a couple of players they hope to develop over a long period of time. So, yeah, they've done really well, and you'd expect a few clubs to leave open spots, potentially as an SSP. They'll get a couple of train-ons that'll do some work with them over Christmas and then potentially end up on the list full-time, maybe January, February next year.
So, Cal, question without notice, which is dangerous. So, if you don't know, you don't know. But you are the guru, so I expect you to potentially know. But how many selections are we looking at in terms of tomorrow's rookie draft and pre-season selection? Who is the number 1 pick next year? Is it Harley Reid?
Might be Harley Reid. For tomorrow's rookie draft, I don't think there's going to be many more than 25 or so, but I think a lot of those will also be made up of experienced players getting another chance, and they might be your Connor Blakely types as at the Suns, or Jake Stein at the Suns as well from Fremantle and GWS respectively. Jed Anderson's a chance to be a rookie pick tomorrow. He might also be a SSP pick for the Suns later in the year. That can go through that way. So I do think we probably won't see that many new faces, which again is going to be really difficult because you look at some of the names who haven't been picked up, and talk about Sam Gilbey, an injury hit season, Mitch Skabowski from the Dandenong Stingrays in Vic Country had a really strong season as well. Jaden Magor, Luke Teal, It's a challenge for a lot of these guys because, but I do think, and I also think that Blake Drury is a really strong chance to be taken in the rookie draft tomorrow. I'd expect him to get a go, and I hope he does because Blake Drury is as hard a worker as I think we've seen come through in recent years. A lot about Jack Higgins' type of professionalism coming through. Like Jack was into everything, and Blake is very similar in that fashion, and probably plays in a slightly similar role as well.
How much of an impact do you think the fact that we've had 2 COVID-interrupted years has played on this too, with some of these guys' development? Because I mean, it's probably set a few back in terms of that. So then they might be later bloomers or just needed more time playing footy.
I think that's real. Yeah, I think that's real for this year. And you speak to some recruiters who think that the 16th year might be even more important in terms of development than the 17th year. Well, these guys lost both of them in a lot of cases. They didn't get any 2020 season essentially, and last year, you know, if you're in Victoria, which makes up 60% of the draft pool every year, then they missed out on most of the season as well. So I think there is a lag effect of that, and you'd hope that next year we see the end of that lag because. And that has been a bonus of this year covering the draft and following it, and for recruiters as well, that we've seen so many under-17s players that we love already and so much talent there, and there is a lot of ability to scour across and already on show, and we haven't been able to see the bottom ages like we have in the past couple of years. So that's a really good thing about this year as well.
The one thing I'd say as well, if these players that do miss out on their chance either tonight or tomorrow at the rookie draft, they need just to look at one player from this year's draft as inspiration. Look at someone like a Harvey Gallagher, who at the back end of last year had completely dropped away in his top age year as an 18-year-old, didn't have any interest going towards the draft, missed out on mid-season having had a really strong first half of the year and thought his AFL dream was over, but then managed to have a really solid back end of the season, changed position, started kicking goals, enjoyed his footy again and winds up on an AFL list. So he's a perfect example of a 19-year-old who gets his opportunity now, and I know there's not many at the end of every year. I mean, he's a one-off this year, for example, but it can happen if you have a really strong year.
Cal Toomey, you must be a relieved man nearly, because we have, I think, maybe 3 more selections possibly, if we're looking at our tablet right, and so far we are stuck on 59 selections as a total number for this year's draft, and that's what you said at the start of tonight. On record, you said there'd be 59, and right now we're on 59.
Maths is not my strong suit. It never has been. I'm not great with numbers, but that would be a nice number to have got right.
It would be. It would be. How are you feeling?
I think we're there.
We're nearly there. All right, well, let's get to Sarah Ollie while we just kill some time for a little bit, and she has Stephen Wells from Geelong with her.
Well, Stephen, talk to me about Jai Clark. He is another local boy. He's from Queenscliff. He doesn't have to travel far to get to the Cattery. Was that behind your thinking when you selected him, or is he just a great kid and a great player?
Sarah, I can understand why people might associate the easy choice of picking a boy from Queenscliff, a Geelong Falcon, big country boy, but it was Jai's talent that got him picked by the Cats. He's had an outstanding couple of years, really, and the qualities that he shows were exactly what we were looking for when we had our pick. Great choices that we had to make because there were very, very good players around our selection, but it was hard to overlook Jai, and it just worked out well for us that he's from Queenscliff.
Now, we've heard the comparisons with Joel Selwood. They are lofty comparisons, and they're big comparisons to put on a young kid just coming into the system. Can you tell us about those comparisons and how real they are in terms of his playing style, but also the leadership qualities that he has?
Well, I think it's any player would take it as a compliment to be compared to Joel Selwood, but we just want Jai to be Jai, to be honest. It's probably too much to expect that anyone will be the next Joel Selwood at Geelong Footy Club. So we just want Jai to come in and be himself. That'll be good enough for us for sure. He is a brilliant leader in his own way, different to some of the other leaders that we have at the club and have had in the past. He's also a great ball getter and a terrific teammate, a tough kid. So I can understand the comparisons, but as I said a couple of times, we just want Jai to be Jai.
All right, Cal, Nat Riley, over to you.
Stephen, you had a bit of a wait between picking Jai and then your next selection coming in with Phoenix Foster. What do you expect from Phoenix early doors, and how do you see his development going as a key position player who showed a bit at times this year?
Yeah, Cal, Phoenix is complementary to what we already have at the club. I suppose he and Jai are pretty different players, and we took into account also what we already had in the last couple of years of drafting. And Phoenix is a tall player. He's got plenty of athleticism, great skill for a big fella, a good competitive drive, and at 197 centimetres, we've obviously got a bit of time to see him develop, and talking to him just a little while ago, we know he's very excited to get to Geelong and see how he goes.
Stephen, there's been 59 players picked in this draft, and that's what it'll land on in the end. It's one of the lowest amounts since the draft's come through, particularly in recent years as well. Is there any trends that you've seen from watching other clubs around the selection, and also just we're talking about before about the COVID lag of a lot of these players over the last couple of years, and how real that's been in terms of the performances this season?
I think it's totally reasonable to say that the development of the players, particularly in Victoria over the last couple of years, has been compromised a bit with lack of footy. It's not just the lack of games they play, but it's the hundreds of training sessions they miss as well. But I haven't assessed how other clubs have gone and what trends there might be. I know at our club, the only reason we had the 2 selections in this national draft was because we had 3 players coming through the trade period. So still 5 new players into the club. We'll have 2 or 3 rookies as well, and an Irishman come in. So we still have a turnover of about 10 players, which is pretty normal for us, I guess. But there's no doubt all of these players that have got their chance at this year's draft will appreciate it.
Stephen, you're obviously going to bring a couple of players in tomorrow as well, and Oscar and Ted. What can you tell us about them, and what can Cats fans expect from them?
Well, assuming they're still not picked tonight, I don't think it's quite over, but maybe it is. But Oscar Riccardi, son of Peter, has tested brilliantly well. He's got great endurance and great skill, but Oscar's a very, very smart footballer. Played on the wing and in defence for the Geelong Falcons. After being one of those players that you talked about as was affected by COVID, he really came from nowhere at the start of this season, having not played much footy at all recently. And Ted Clohessy is a good, tough, competitive midfielder. Deserved his chance to get onto an AFL list, and it's going to be as a rookie with the Geelong Footy Club after not getting drafted tonight, but him being an NGA player.
Well, good luck tomorrow as well, Wellesley, and well done on what you've achieved tonight. 2 selections there, Jai Clark and Phoenix Foster. We can't wait to see what the Cats do in 2023. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Nat. Thanks, everybody. Bob.
Stephen Wells there with Sarah Ollie, and that is the draft done and dusted for 2022. Thanks so much for sticking with us. We are going to be back on the other side of this to just break it down for you, recap all that has happened. There is a lot to analyse and unpack, but before we do that, of course, there's only one song we've been talking about this week. She's Will Be Loved. Here, enjoy this.
This is our 4th iteration now of our draft song.
Yes.
Run through them. What have we had?
We've had Wonderwall, The Crows Just Need a Tall. We had We Didn't Start the Fire, The Dogs Are Going to Get Jamara,
yes,
which was, it was pretty good, that one.
Yep.
We had Born in the USA, which was obviously Horn in the SA, which is, I'm not sure if that's aged well or not.
Underrated, I reckon.
Yeah, but also like it's sort of aged.
It has gone back to the SA.
And this year we've been sort of working through our options for the draft song. And before we get too criticised for what's coming up, just mind you that we've had about 8 hours of full-on draft content over the last couple of days and leading into tomorrow. And across from that, probably 20 hours of draft content live. So spare us a couple of minutes of indulgence and just a little bit of fun to line things up. A couple of options. Obviously, it's got to be player related.
Yes, to this year's draft.
So we had a suggestion come through around take me to the father-son in Brisbane. Whoa. A little like Cuba. Ashy was, as in, it's not the same Ashy was, as in Ashcroft, obviously. And you know that this one's been on my radar for a while.
Yeah, this one has. And Cal was listening to it the whole day, and it didn't get tiring at all.
No. Yeah. I'm a cat that beep, ba 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 da boop. Anyway,
we also
had one as well.
Yeah, the Arctic Monkeys. I bet you look good in the dance floor. I bet the Kankers are taking George Wardlaw.
That would have been good.
It would have been nice,
but it doesn't. Yeah, it's very quick. Bit too grunge.
A bit too. Yeah, we would have had to.
So anyway, we decided on this one for this year's draft song, and it is "She's Will Be Loved." "She's Will Be Loved" by Maroon. Pick 5. Anyway, I'll...
This is ending the show, right?
This is going to see us out for today's show. We'll see you tomorrow if you can last these next couple of minutes. All right, you ready?
I doubt that we'll be able to.
Why is it always me who starts these?
I don't know.
Sandy Dragon, only 18. He had no trouble kicking goals. I know the words. Will Ashcroft and Cam McKenzie, they were playing different midfield roles. He ran for miles and wound up picked by North.
Love that.
They've had so many top picks and somehow they have more. I don't mind seeing Cadman at 1. Wardlaw, Sardis and the father's son. Look for the half forward with all the goal. Kanga's keen to have him stay a while. And she's will be loved. Hit the high note. And she's will be loved. Tap down to Jinby and to Jai Clarksons. Hawks and Cats got them ranked. Buslinger got the spoil, Humphrey got this mark. Nobody even said they've tanked. It's not always beep tests and time trials, it's interviews and psychs and questionnaires. Yeah.
Where does Philippou go for a phantom? It's not fair.
Yeah. Here we go. I don't mind seeing Cadman at 1.
Really clap going.
Wardlaw, Sardis and the father's son. Look for the half forward with all the goal. Kanga's keen to have him stay a while, and she's will be loved, and she's will be loved. Bring us home, Cal. A bit of news in here. The Bombers, they looked, he wasn't getting through. They thought about splitting their pick into 2. Ed Allen, he came, but not high enough to stop the Roos from siding with Harry's stuff. Yeah. Tap in his draft number, scroll through his snaps. His goals are gonna be plentiful.
Last time.
I don't mind seeing Cadman at 1. Wardlaw, Sardis and the father's son. Look for the half forward with all the goal. Kanga's keen to have him stay a while, and she's will be loved.
High note, Cal.
And she's will be loved.
You're welcome. My gift to you viewers out there, maybe don't quit your day job, but I actually enjoyed that. I think that was better than last year.
Did you?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, okay. I probably did too. It's been pretty well received.
It's up there with the dogs are going to get tomorrow.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
Harry liked it, which is always important as well. So.
All right, well done. All right, so the draft is actually over. 59 picks. That's what we landed on in the end. Well done, Cal. A big tick to you. Again, we're going to recap exactly what has happened here across the 2 nights of the 2022 NAB AFL draft, going all the way back to night 1 and round 1. It was Aaron Cadman who was the number 1 draft pick. Will Ashcroft, that bid coming from North Melbourne, so he went number 2 as soon as the Lions matched that bid. Harry Sheasel, George Wardlaw there, 3 and 4, just as we thought. The pick that caused Cal a lot of sleepless nights was the pick 5 with the Bombers. They took Elijah Sardis, then Bailey Humphrey fell to the Gold Coast Suns, Cameron McKenzie to Hawthorn. So that was all pretty straightforward, that top 10, Cal. And as we go over the page, this is where it started to get a little bit interesting, because that bid for Jasper Fletcher came a little bit earlier than we had thought, but Elijah Hewitt at West Coast, that was the one.
No, it was. And they had the big call to make between Elijah Hewitt and Ed Allen, the locals there, and also Matt Jefferson, to be honest, was right in that conversation as well. So that was where that one left. And then the last pick of last night was Darcy Jones at the Giants, which opened up things for round 2, which became a key defender marketplace.
It was.
Who wants one? We got him. Max Krzyzewski at the Giants, he can go back and go forward. Harry Barnett, the ruckman there, changes things up a little bit for the Eagles mix. They went for pace and power alongside of that. Look at all the other key backs. Essendon, Lewis Hayes, there's one there. Braden George, I think that's a good pick for North Melbourne. Put him away for next year, but get him ready with his ACL coming back and a prospect there. Go a couple more. James Van Ness went to St Kilda. Hugh Davies went to Fremantle to continue the key defenders as well. Tom McCallum, another tall defender, to the Port Adelaide Footy Club. And Jed Adams, a tall defender at Melbourne as well.
And then we started to get into the third round of draft onwards. I was really happy for Harvey Gallagher, as we mentioned, the 19-year-old comes back and gets his opportunity. Another mature age who finds his way to Fremantle in Tom Emmett. They also went for a ruckman in Max Noble. Adelaide, I think, had a really good mid part of this draft because they got a couple of really good young inside midfielders, Billy Dowling and then Hugh Bond a little bit later. Alwyn Davey Jr., the bid came in from Hawthorn there that Essendon matched. Richmond started their night with Caleb Smith. And then we just saw Geelong then ending that round with Phoenix Foster, who had a really good year for Norwood.
Yeah, Tom Scully, Port Adelaide, they waited a long time to get into the draft, but they've ended up with 3 players in the end, Tom Scully being one of those, a key forward. Jaden Davey, the twin of Alwyn, obviously get picked up as well then. So the first father-son twins in the AFL, which is fabulous. Noah Long, Kyle Marshall, the very last pick of this year's draft, off to Port Adelaide, a key defender as well. So Port Adelaide really stocking up their key pillars at either end of the ground. As we take a look now at some of the clubs and what they did, and we're going to start with the Giants, Riley, because they had 5 picks in the first 34, Cal, and it all started with Aaron Cadman, but Harry Ralston was probably a surprise to the Giants. It might have thrown their plans out a little bit, even though Adrian Caruso, when we spoke to him, he didn't let on about that.
No, I guess the fact that we often forget around Aaron Cadman is that he's a star and he's a really good player. And just because we've known that he was going to go to the Giants for a little bit, I think people have sort of forgotten about it to some degree, that he joined the Giants. He is their key forward that they want to build their team around. So Harry Ralston came a little bit later, their academy player. Darcy Jones at the end of the first round. Then they held on to their first pick tonight for the start of the second round, took the key defender in Max Krzyzewski, and Toby McMullen, I'm a fan of. I think there's real upside in him as a small forward / midfield option too. So I like the mix. There is a mix there of picks. There's a key forward, there's an in and under midfielder, there's a bit of everything small. There's a key back and key forward in one in Grzuski, and Toby McMullen could be quite an exciting prospect. So I like the mix and the blend. And people talk about blend. When you've got 5 picks, you need to have a blend. I think they've made that deal.
And hopefully the Giants can actually hold on to some of these top draft picks, as well as we know, unfortunately, they've lost some of them in the trade period and the like. So really an interesting time with a new coach, as well as we look at North Melbourne, who also have a new coach, Riley, Harry Sheasel and George Wardlaw. I think we knew for a while they were going to go to North Melbourne, but Braden George, probably a forgotten player, given he's going to miss with an ACL injury next season. But what we saw from him is very, very talented.
Yeah, it is. Let's start at the top, though. They started this trade period, this off-season, with pick 1. And essentially for pick 1, they got 2 players because they decided to split it. They moved back to 2 and 3. They made the bid on Will Ashcroft, and they got Harry Sheasel and George Wardlaw, which, I mean, you could have made an argument that either of those 2 players could have been in the pick 1 conversation themselves regardless. So Sheasel gives them a bit of forward half quality, which I really think they desperately needed. He'll be a goal kicker that'll probably play some football next year. And Wardlaw, we didn't see him, obviously, because of his hamstring injuries throughout the year. We didn't see a lot of him. But what we saw power. We saw a really inside baller player that can make a difference in that midfield group, which I think their midfield group needs. I like some of the players they've got there, but a lot still depends on Will Phillips and Tom Powell coming through to aid the likes of Luke Davies-Uniacke, Jai Simpkin and Ben Cunnington. Braden George, love this pick. You can give him time, but if you've got a young list, you've got that the patient approach. You can take that patient approach because you're not going to be in the window to challenge next year. Back the talent, back that he comes back in 2024 and makes an impact for your football club. And then Cooper Harvey, the good news story there for North Melbourne, the son of the AFL, VFL all-time games record holder in Brent Harvey. He comes to the club as a father.
Looking at the Pies, they took 3 selections because they actually traded out pick 30 to Carlton for a future second round, Cal. But Ed Allen, Jacob Ryan, a key defender there, and Joe Richards, who's a 22-year-old from Wangaratta. Nice to see some mature age players not born in the 2000s making their way on the list.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting draft for me in that I feel like all these players were probably ranked a fair bit higher than the picks that they were taken from within. Like, we heard that the Jacob Ryan pick, he might have been linked to the Pies at pick 16. We had Derek Hine on the show a couple of days ago on Draft Night Countdown, and he said, oh, well, he's in the mix, and I think he was in that mix. So to get him at their second pick after Ed Allen probably slipped a couple of spots later than most people would have predicted heading into night 1 was a good win. And then Joe Richards as well. I think he was probably around the mark if they had stayed with their third pick inside the top 30. They moved that back as part of a trade, so did that deal and managed to still get Joe Richards, who they've been interested in, to add some spark and spunk to that forward line alongside Jack Ginnivan. So that'll be an interesting mix as well.
And then finally, Riley, just looking at St Kilda and what they achieved in the draft, and it all started last night. Pick 10, Mateus Filippo. He's already been down to training today as a commander keen, but he is a really great talent.
He is, yeah. I was really intrigued by what St Kilda would do heading into this draft. They obviously started with pick 10. I think they were in a bit of a strange situation where they were probably just waiting to see whether or not it was Elijah Sardis, Cam McKenzie, Jai Clark, Ruben Ginbey, Mateus Filippo, which one fell through to them. It was Mateus Filippo in the end. I think they've got a really good player there. We spoke about the talent that he's got and that forward half ability that he's got, but he's also a young draftee. We mentioned that his birthday's not until December, so he's got a full year of development, another full year of development under his belt next year as well. And then I was really impressed with the pick of Ollie Houghton at 35. I think they needed a bit more X-factor forward of the ball. He provides that through his natural athleticism and his energy, a high-energy player and a lot of fun in terms of the way he attacks the ball and takes marks inside the forward half. So I like those two picks in terms of what they add from the forward half perspective. And then they strengthen key position stocks on either side of that pick of Ollie Houghton with James Van Ness, who's a key defender, and Isaac Healer, who can play as a key forward. So ultimately I really like the mix that they got and the balance that they got in this draft pool, and the fact that they were able to start that with Mateus Filippo, who's I thought was one of the really top echelon players of this year's draft, and they were able to get him at pick 10. I think that was a big win for them to start the night.
So winners galore. Any surprises from each of you that you sort of think is worth talking about?
Oh, there's going to be some players who are unlucky to be missing out, and that's not a surprise as such, but it's more just the reality of how many picks there were on the table. As you said, 59 players drafted across the two nights. That's the lowest ever. That means that there's some really good players who are going to be unlucky, and some will get some opportunities in the rookie draft tomorrow. I think Blake Drew should get a chance, and I think he will. As a rookie selection, I think Luke Teal is an option as well for a rookie selection. I think Mitch Skabowski will be an option as well as a rookie. So there's some good players who missed out, and that's a tough night for them. And as you've said, Riley, that there are a number of bounce-back stories in recent years with the mid-season draft. Harvey Gallagher being one of them tonight, who's overlooked last year in the national draft, overlooked in the mid-season draft, and comes back with a spell of form to get himself picked in the early enough part of the draft, really, where he wasn't in the danger zone. So, look, it's tough to be. It's never been tougher to be drafted. There's no doubt about that. And the players who've got their chance really deserve it, and there's a lot of players who missed out who would have deserved an opportunity as well, and you wouldn't have raised an eyebrow. So they'll go to bed tonight disappointed, but the rookie draft tomorrow is a new day, and there'll be some selections made, and there'll be also some opportunities through the pre-season supplemental period to get them to train on and show their wares. Nick Martin was overlooked this time last year.
Exactly. So the rookie draft, 3 o'clock Australian Eastern Daylight Time on afl.com.au and the AFL Live app. So yes, the rookie draft and the pre-season draft with myself and Cal. So make sure you tune in for that. And that is it from us. It has been a huge 2 nights of the 2022 NAB AFL Draft. Congratulations and best of luck to all the draftees as they start a new chapter of their lives. Cal and Riley, thank you to you both. You have both done an inordinate amount of work. It's been crazy to watch you in particular making all of those phone calls every day for the last 3 weeks. So congratulations to both of you.
Thanks, Nat, and likewise to you. Big weekend for you getting the AFLW Grand Final done and catching that flight done. I know it was a charter flight, but you're at the front of the plane, but it's all good on that front. But it's good that you made time for the draft.
Oh, thanks as always. It's my favourite time of the year. Thank you as well to Sarah Ollie, who has been roaming around Marvel Stadium for us. Plus, a massive shout out to our fabulous producer Jack Haley, the crew, production team, graphics, and the team that's been on the floor in the studio keeping us hydrated for the night. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us on NAB AFL Draft Night Live. The rookie and pre-season draft will be live here on afl.com.au and the AFL Live app tomorrow, as I mentioned, 3 o'clock Australian Eastern Daylight Time. So hopefully you can join us then. Until then, good night.